41. Schedule. Welcome to Switzerland. A voice drifted over. Lynn turned and saw an old woman with silver gray hair tied in a meticulous bun walking toward them. She wore a sharply tailored deep blue robe. Her pace was steady, her gaze sharp and clear. She gave off an impression of maturity, stability, and efficient competence. "Oh, Genevieve, it's a pleasure to see you again." Dumbledore smiled and stepped forward to greet her. The newcomer was Genevieve Oberlin, the Minister of Magic for Switzerland. That she had come out in person to welcome them showed how seriously the Swiss magical community was taking this inaugural international competition. Minister Oberlin's decisive, businesslike manner reminded Lynn of Professor McGonagall. "Greetings. This young student must be the contestant sent by Hogwarts? Quite young, indeed." Genevieve glanced at Lynn as she spoke to Dumbledore. After a brief exchange of pleasantries, she got straight to the point and led Dumbledore, Lynn, and the others toward the building where the opening ceremony would be held. From the outside, the building looked like an ancient, classical stone hall. But the moment they stepped inside, Lynn felt the space open out into something extraordinarily vast. The interior was clearly enchanted with a sophisticated, undetectable extension charm. The inside bore no resemblance to the modest exterior, like a small hut hiding a massive stadium. Before them lay a magnificent, gigantic hall. The dome was not solid. Rather, it was a masterpiece of enchantment that simulated the movements of the sun, moon, and stars, shimmering with radiant light. It resembled the magical ceiling of the Hogwarts Great Hall, but on a far grander scale, the star trajectories much more complex. In the center of the hall was a slightly sunken circular platform with a surface as smooth as a mirror. Complex circuits of magical runes flickered faintly across it. That was likely the main arena. Tiered spectator stands rose around the arena so that every seat had an excellent view. On the second floor, directly opposite the arena's prime position, sat a row of seats set aside for the judges. After a quick tour of the venue, Minister Genevieve excused herself. She still had to welcome other arriving teams and important guests. Before leaving, she reminded Dumbledore, Lynn, and the others not to miss the official opening ceremony that would start shortly. Watching her brisk departure, Lynn couldn't help thinking, is the Swiss Ministry of Magic that short-staffed? Even the minister is doing the greeting? The accommodation arranged by the organizers was right next to the venue, a row of fully equipped single rooms. It wasn't luxurious, but it was clean, tidy, and more than sufficient for the contestants' needs. Now, I declare the opening ceremony of the first International Youth Alchemy Competition officially open. Minister Genevieve Oberlin stood on the podium and announced the start in a clear, powerful voice. She then introduced the heavyweight members of the judging panel. Vasily Orlov, a famed alchemist from the Soviet Union, creator of the elemental resonance disc. The disc could calm storms, solidify magma, purify water, and even trigger small-scale earthquakes within a certain radius. However, operating it was mentally taxing. One wrong move could lead to fatal overexertion. Sophia van der Velde, an alchemist from the Netherlands and the inventor of mirror amber. This unusual alchemical item could temporarily seal living beings inside without harming them. The amber would dissipate shortly after the sealing ended. It had already proven invaluable in magical medicine, especially for complex treatments and transporting dangerous creatures. Lin Langxin, a master of Eastern alchemy known for the Jade of Seven Emotions. The wearer could resist the influence of negative emotions and convert their own negative feelings into a temporary boost in alchemical power, useful in situations demanding explosive output. Overuse, however, risked emotional imbalance or even lasting personality disorders. Shantanu Adhikari, an alchemy expert from India responsible for synthesizing the Svapna stone. With this gem, one could enter another's dreams to communicate or create nightmares that were difficult to escape. Samuel Brooke, a representative of modern alchemy from the United States, whose main contribution was not a single invention, but the standardization and quantification of many complex, experience-dependent alchemical processes. He introduced rigorous procedures and data recording akin to Muggle scientific experiments, lowering the entry barrier for alchemy and promoting its modernization. Hearing these prestigious names and their accomplishments, Lynn felt his excitement swell. though he also felt a twinge of regret. The legendary Nicholas Flamel was not present. He had wanted, more than anything, to see the centuries-old alchemist for himself. During the rest of the introductions, Lynn learned that representatives from several well-known alchemy schools across the globe were attending, and that many graduates who still loved alchemy had signed up as well. In the end, about 200 contestants had been selected to compete on the same stage. The competition would run in 3 rounds. The first round would eliminate 150 people, the second another 40, leaving the final contenders to vie for the winner's title. The first and second rounds were scheduled for the next day. After the opening ceremony, there was free time before the theoretical exam. Lynn remembered his promise to his roommates and planned to visit Switzerland's magical shopping street. Surely there must be a Swiss equivalent of Diagon Alley. He wanted to browse for unique magical items and local specialties to bring back. As for studying, he grinned at his own thought. Why revise when you have a cheat? He turned to Dumbledore and the Burns couple. Principal, uncle, aunt, I'd like to use the free time to visit the Vault Alley of Switzerland to buy souvenirs for Edgar and the others. Is that all right? He was mainly seeking Dumbledore's approval. Dumbledore blinked, smiled gently, and nodded. Oh, of course you can, child. It's good to relax and conserve your energy for tomorrow's exam. Switzerland's Vault Alley is very close to here. As he spoke, Dumbledore produced a feather that shimmered with a red luster from his robes and handed it to Lynn. This is a feather from Fawkes. If you encounter any unexpected danger, remember to use it. Of course, I very much hope you won't need to. Lynn took the feather and tucked it away carefully, a thought flickering through his mind. If I don't use it, I shouldn't have to return it, right? Thank you, Professor. I'll be careful. After bidding them farewell, Lynn went to a huge fireplace in the accommodation common room. He dipped his fingers into an exquisite silver bowl of sparkling flue powder on a nearby shelf and took a pinch. Foothill Vault Alley, he said clearly, and tossed the powder into the flames. Whoosh! Flames surged up and enveloped him. After the familiar sensation of being tumbled inside a washing machine, Lynn stumbled out of another fireplace framed with alpine rock walls and pine wood trim. Much better than a portkey made by a certain unknown master, he thought as he steadied himself. Lynn looked up and found that he was no longer on an open-air street, but standing in a spacious, sunlit, arched gallery. The dome above wasn't solid glass. It displayed a remarkably realistic scene of the Alps. The path underfoot was paved with highly polished light gray granite slabs that reflected like mirrors. As he walked, the shops on either side reminded him of the competition venue, mostly wood and stone with exquisite carvings and wrought iron signs. But here, the commercial atmosphere was stronger, livelier. He headed straight for his first target, the Edelweiss Magic Materials shop. A bouquet of real Edelweiss hung at the entrance, perfuming the air and cooling anyone who approached. Inside, the scent of herbs, minerals, and strange magical things mingled. Glass counters and wall shelves were neatly lined with countless jars and packages. Hello, do you have snow crystals? Lynn asked a young assistant in a neat clerk's robe. Yes, sir, the clerk smiled. What grade do you need? We have stock from dust level up to core level in various purities and sizes. Snow crystals only condensed at certain magical nodes in the Alps and were used in advanced potions and alchemical arrays. After hearing the price, Lynn was quietly delighted. Being at the source really paid off. Compared to British prices, these were a steal. He bought a large quantity of high-quality snow crystals, plus local specialties like chamois horn powder and dragon blood moss for his brewing. Next, his attention caught on a shop called Precision Moment. The storefront looked cleaner and brighter than Ollivander's. Inside, wands were displayed like fine watches in velvet-lined glass cases. On impulse, Lynn went to the counter and asked the owner, his hair immaculately combed, monocle in place. Sir, if I may ask, do you think the wand chooses the witch or wizard, or the witch or wizard chooses the wand? The question surprised the owner. He pushed his monocle up, thought a moment, then answered, It depends on the individual, sir. Much like watches, some people pursue absolute precision, while others prefer something with character. The same goes for wands. If you're truly drawn to a wand's appearance or philosophy, even if the initial fit isn't perfect, you'll find a way to take it home and break it in over time. Lynn couldn't argue with that. His gaze had already been caught by a wand in the center of the case. The shaft was completely translucent, as if snowflakes were frozen inside, and the tip was set with an ice blue gem, stunning. "You have excellent taste," the owner said, seizing the chance. "This is the glacial sigh. The shaft is carved and polished from alpine mountain crystal. Its core fuses an ice phoenix tail feather with the nerve of an adult crystal dragon, crafted by a master." He rattled off a string of expert terms and processes. "In short, it's not cheap," Lynn interrupted. The owner smiled embarrassingly and held up 2 fingers. 20 galleons. "I'll take it," Lynn said. He had his affinity ability. Wands felt like extensions of his arm, so this was both a practical spare and a beautiful piece. Besides, aesthetics mattered. He visited a few more magical shops. At Spatial Singularity, he found a small brass neutral bank key. When used, it temporarily links any ordinary door to a fixed extra-dimensional safe space of about 3 cubic meters. Perfect for storing valuables or creating an absolutely private space for someone like Ollie, who liked solitude. At Kronos' workshop, he bought a precise pocket watch for William. Besides keeping perfect time, it had a simple enchantment. When the wearer concentrates on a task, it slightly boosts focus and reduces distractions, ideal for William, who loved learning. Edgar's gift was easier. In a grocery shop that smelled of spice and baking, he found a cocoa forge, a small copper cauldron that, when filled with water, quickly brews a rich, fragrant magical hot cocoa that wards off cold and tiredness. Edgar, who loved food and comfort, would adore it. Satisfied with his purchases, Lynn returned to the common room fireplace. As he stepped out and smoothed his robes, he noticed several curious looks. A group of young witches and wizards in various school robes had gathered in the lounge, eyeing his shopping bags and his new face. Lynn straightened and introduced himself. "Hello, my name is Lynn. I'm from Hogwarts, and I'm a contestant in the competition." The silence broke. A tall boy with striking short white hair was first to reply, his voice tinged with an American accent. "Hello, I'm Ryan Sanderson from Ilvermorny." A curly-haired girl in brightly colored robes nodded. Her English had a different rhythm but was clear enough. "Amina Okoro from Ouagadougou." An elegant boy in refined robes bowed slightly and smiled, his accent foreign but polite. "Luc Leclerc from Beaubatons." The last one stood in heavy dark robes, trimmed with fur, tall and pale, and offered a flat, indifferent greeting. "Katja Volok, Durmstrang." Was there a hint of contempt in that tone? Lynn wondered. Ryan, curious about Lynn's shopping bags, asked, "Hey Lynn, did you go to Vault Alley to buy those?" "Yes," Lynn shook the bags. "The magical specialties here in Switzerland are great, very diverse. You should check it out if you get the chance. It's close by." Katja suddenly sized him up and the slight contempt became overt. "Judging by your appearance, you don't look very old. Hogwarts sent someone like you to an international competition? Are you even capable?" The air chilled. Ryan raised an eyebrow but stayed silent. Amina frowned. Luke kept a polite, distant smile. Lynn realized it wasn't an illusion. Katja was openly hostile for no reason. He didn't want to waste words on someone so unpleasant or start a confrontation before the competition. He let his smile go, met Katya's gaze calmly, and said without arrogance or apology, "Whether I'm capable or not, we'll only know after the competition." With that, he ignored the others and walked to his room, his impression of Durmstrang sinking to rock bottom. 43. Face-to-face mockery. Ladies and gentlemen, today we proudly present the Wizarding World's New Generation Alchemy Gala. Just now, after a rigorous first-round theoretical screening, only 50 of the most outstanding young alchemists remain to continue the competition. In this round, you will. The announcer on the rostrum kept speaking in an overwrought theatrical tone to pump up the crowd. Lynn doubted the man's professionalism. Those florid lines sounded more like hype than understanding of alchemy. Bored, he began to look around. His gaze landed on the viewing stands, and to his surprise, he saw Edgar's parents, Edward and Anna Burns, waving at him with encouraging smiles. He raised an eyebrow. He hadn't expected the ministry to be so relaxed that they could spare time to watch the contest. Back on the stage, Lynn's eyes flicked across the other contestants. Katya Volkov from Durmstrang was still there, looking every inch the arrogant show-off. Lynn remembered seeing Katya's theoretical score. Unimpressive. He wondered how Durmstrang picked their candidates. Had they really chosen a general from among the mediocre? The host finally got to the point. We have prepared alchemical devices with identical damage and configuration for each contestant. Your task is to use your knowledge, your skill, and your creativity to repair them and restore their proper function. Now then, the second round of the competition officially begins. All contestants, please enter your cubicles. At the host's cue, the arena's enchantments activated. The narrow booths that had been used for the written test stretched and widened into small workshops, each fitted with basic alchemical tools and workbenches. The rooms were open-topped for full visibility. Lynn moved to his bench and found his assigned device delivered by teleportation magic. He blinked. The object lying on the table was a complex, compass-like mechanism etched with countless ancient runes. Even as a simplified, training-grade model, its design and energy flow clearly echoed Judge Vasily Orlov's signature work, the elemental resonance disc. Was the committee really handing out prototypes like this? Lynn's eyes widened. This was a significant gesture. Boom! Sizzle! Bang! No sooner had the clock started than explosions, short circuits, and cracking materials began to sound from around the arena. Repairing a device of this caliber was a severe challenge for most contestants. The scent of burning metal and the tang of wild magic filled the air. None of it distracted Lynn. He inhaled deeply, and the vast alchemical knowledge from Graves surfaced in his mind. His primal resonance talent gave him an instinctive sense of the device's harmony. He slipped into work. He took the spool of mithril wire and, using delicate alchemical tweezers and fusion tools, carefully mended the broken magic-conducting circuits. His movements were steady and precise. Next, he probed the inner rune core, feeling for blocked energy channels or misalignments, testing whether the small elemental crystal at the heart of the device was intact or needed its resonance frequency recalibrated. The task required painstaking attention and time. After what felt like ages, Lynn finished the final energy connection. The compass trembled in his hands as a warm luster spread across its surface, and the core crystal glowed steadily. He let out a long breath and walked out of his cubicle with the repaired instrument. He had expected to be among the first to finish, but Katya Volkov was already lounging in the seating area with a smug smirk. Lynn ignored him and found a place to sit. After more waiting, the host's voice rang out again. Time's up. All contestants who haven't finished, please stop immediately. Now, let the inspections begin. Those who hadn't completed their repairs, who had given up, or who had blown up their benches were eliminated. More than half the cubicles vanished. The judges began to test each submitted device, injecting tiny amounts of magic to assess elemental guidance and stability. From one tester came a harsh, sizzling screech. Amina Wagadu's compass spun wildly, then died in a puff of black smoke. Her face went white. One by one, other devices either exploded under testing or lay inert like dead metal. The few that passed the basic tests and ran steadily were Ryan Sanderson from Overmorny, Luke Leclerc from Beaubaton, and Lynn. Their compasses held true in the judge's hands. Finally, it was Katya Volkov's turn. He handed his compass to Judge Vasily Orlov with visible confidence. Lynn watched as the judge began the test and immediately noticed an odd dark red glow at several edge connection points. The energy flow felt agitated and unstable. Lynn understood in an instant. Katya had prioritized speed and a quick burst of performance over sound technique. He'd used demon gold for the core circuit instead of mithril. Demon gold conducted magic well, but it was notoriously volatile and fundamentally at odds with the pure energies of elemental crystals. It might hold together for a moment, but continuous operation would force a meltdown, timing entirely at the mercy of luck. As if on cue, the compass started to throw off dangerous sparks within the first minute. Its casing reddened and warped with audible creaks before collapsing into a molten lump and vanishing in a puff of black smoke. Katya's smirk froze, then crumpled into shock and disbelief. Lynn couldn't resist. He walked over, slow and deliberate, and let his words drip with sarcasm. Well, whose masterpiece is this?" he drawled, eyes flicking between the melted remains and Katya. So clever, can't be repaired, so just melt it down and get a new one. Truly a revolutionary strategy, so far beyond the reach of us mere mortals. Katya spun to glare at him, lips trembling. You, he began, furious. You what? Your skills are inferior. You misused materials and made a disposable piece of junk, and now you'll mock me? Katya stammered, searching for a retort, but Lynn cut him off with another barb. You can't even grasp basic material compatibility, and you're representing your school at an international competition? Is Durmstrang's reputation being thrown away by certain people? Lynn's tone was icy and contemptuous. Katya's face had turned a sickly, flushed red. He shoved past the people beside him and stormed out of the arena in a near panic. Lynn watched his back for a moment, then shrugged. He had little sympathy for those who provoked others and then couldn't back themselves up. 44. A meeting of time travelers? Now, the list of finalists entering the third and final round has been decided. They are Ryan Sanderson from Ilvermorny, Luke Leclerc from Beauxbatons, and Lynn from Hogwarts. The host's voice rolled across the stadium, drawing cheers and applause. The third round of the competition will determine the ultimate champion of this tournament. The contestants will have 1 week to conceptualize and complete your works. Now, to reveal the final topic. He stretched the pause for effect, then snapped out the 2 words. Innovation. Yes, innovation. The soul of alchemy lies in bringing the new from the old, in transcending known boundaries. What we expect is not a perfect replica of predecessors' works, but a pioneering creation that belongs to your era and to you personally. It can be a wholly new invention or a revolutionary improvement on an existing object. 1 week from now, we will witness the birth of a miracle right here. Back at the temporary dormitory provided by the competition, Lynn flung himself onto the soft bed and stared at the ceiling as his mind began spinning. Innovation. The theme was broad, but the bar was high. What should he make? A weapon? Protective armor? Or something small and clever like in the first round? Everything felt a little tame, not subversive enough. His fingers idly rubbed together. They felt empty. The thought struck him like lightning. A smartphone. If he could replicate a smartphone's functions in this magical world, that would be an epoch-making innovation. He shook his head at himself. Handling integrated circuits, operating systems, and applications in a week? Impossible, unless Merlin himself took over. Then simplify. Keep only the core. Messaging and real-time calls. Much more feasible. He thought of the 2-way mirrors already used by wizards for real-time calls. They worked, but they were exorbitantly expensive and typically bound one-to-one, luxury items that couldn't be popularized. That's the angle. He could make an alchemical device that was relatively low cost and capable of multi-point real-time voice communication. Practical, innovative, and useful. Lynn sat up and was out the door. The contestants had access to a public materials warehouse stocked with basic alchemical supplies. He pushed a small cart and began his shopping spree. Resonance glass for a screen, mithril wire and dragon blood ink with excellent arcane conductivity for drawing the core rune array, stable mana crystals to serve as the battery and arcane energy source, ebony shells for housing and packaging, anti-interference shielding stone powder. Like a purchasing agent, he found everything he needed quickly. Back in his studio bedroom, which was equipped with basic alchemical tools, Lynn sorted the materials, lit a specialized fusion crucible, and adjusted the rune engraving pen's energy output. Knowledge from his engraving lessons, communication runes, rune inscription technique, energy conduction, surfaced with crystalline clarity. His talent for primal resonance gave him instinctive insight into how to fuse materials of different natures and how to tune the rune array to the best resonance state. He picked up the first crystal. Mana began to gather at his engraving knife. Now, we invite the finalists to take the stage in turn to present and explain your alchemical works to the judges and all guests. The host's voice filled the venue, and the atmosphere climbed to a fever pitch. First, please welcome from Beauxbatons Academy, Luke Leclerc. Luke smoothed his silk robes and walked onto the stage, poised and confident. He held a refined-looking device. Distinguished judges, ladies and gentlemen, he bowed slightly. The work I present is called the Beauty Image Capturing Machine. He aimed it below the stage, and with a click, a portrait slid out. The image showed a subtly optimized silhouette, even skin tone, brighter eyes, the subject's features enhanced. Its function is simple, Luke explained. It automatically beautifies captured portraits, reduces blemishes, improves complexion, and shows everyone's most confident, radiant side. Warm applause rose from the audience, especially from the ladies, who clearly appreciated anything that enhanced personal appearance. Lynn watched from the audience with his mouth slightly open. A beauty camera, expensive, no doubt. Beauxbaton's fashion sense, apparently, had progressed far. Next, the host announced, from Ilvermorny, Ryan Sanderson. Ryan stepped up without a large prop. He pulled a flat metal box from his pocket, about the size of a smartphone in Lynn's head, with a few buttons and a small display. Everyone, he called, look at this. I call it the Walkman. He pressed a button and clear, pleasant music filled the venue. Its core function is music. Through a magical engraving method, it stores hundreds of tunes for listening anywhere, anytime with little loss of sound quality. On long journeys or between study sessions, what could be more soothing than beautiful music? He swayed to the tune, and the audience erupted in applause. Many young wizards' eyes lit up at the idea of portable music. Lynn felt his worldview wobble. Two devices so aligned with Muggle tech, beauty filters and a portable player. Was this an accidental convergence? His stomach dropped a little. The rest of the contestants offered sensible, practical tweaks to existing alchemical items, a thermos that automatically adjusts temperature, a dinner knife that can detect simple toxins, and the like. Ingenious, but nothing that triggered Lynn's weird sense of déjà vu. Then the host called, "Finally, from Hogwarts, Lynn." He took a deep breath, calmed his mind, and stepped onto the presentation stage. From his pocket, he produced a flat, plate-like object of metal and transparent crystal glass. It had smooth lines and a sleek surface, a gently glowing screen in the center, and a single sigil button beneath it. "The alchemical item I present is the smartphone," he announced. The minimalist device and that simple name made Luke and Ryan freeze where they sat. Luck frowned in doubt. Ryan's eyes went wide, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly. How could there already be one? And with that name? Lynn didn't bother with their reactions and began to explain. The core function of this device is convenient long-distance communication. It performs instant calls like a two-way mirror, but it also supports one-to-many group calls and the transmission of text and short voice messages across any distance. He paused and delivered what he knew would be the clincher. And most importantly, the goal of my design is affordability. After optimization and standardized production, its cost can be controlled at a level ordinary wizarding families can afford. Samuel, one of the judges, visibly nodded in approval. A low murmur of surprise rolled through the crowd. The cost of two-way mirrors was infamous. A widely affordable communication device would be revolutionary. Lynn demonstrated, tapping simple icons on the screen. Here is the contact list. You can store contacts. Here is the call log. You can save short call recordings for reference. With the built-in Mana Crystal Energy Core, it lasts several days under normal use and is rechargeable. For information security, a two-way encryption rune array ensures only the intended recipient can decipher communications. For privacy, you can set fingerprint, facial, or password unlocking, like this. Each function in operation drew increasing exclamations and applause. Mention group calls and affordable for ordinary people, and the crowd nearly brought the roof down. The presentation segment ended, and the judges withdrew to deliberate. Their discussion was not nearly as dramatic as the host made it seem. Faced with Lynn's combination of innovation, practicality, universal benefit, and meticulous craftsmanship, the gap was obvious. The vote was almost unanimous. The host returned, excitement blazing on his face. After careful discussion and adjudication by the judging panel, I now have the honor to announce, congratulations to Lynn from Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry for winning the championship of the International Youth Alchemy Competition with his revolutionary alchemical work, the smartphone. We invite the Swiss Minister for Magic, Ms. Genevieve Oberlin, to present the trophy, certificate, and competition rewards to the champion. Minister Genevieve stepped forward with a smile and handed Lynn a crystal trophy engraved with alchemical symbols and an ornate certificate, along with a heavy bag of galleons, 5,000 in total, and a simple wooden box, presumably containing a master's manuscripts. "Well done, child. she said, placing the awards in his hands. A soft chime sounded in Lynn's mind as if from an invisible ledger. Ding! Task completed, rewards issued. The post-match banquet was held in the ballroom provided by the organizers. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow, and long tables were piled with Swiss delicacies, self-spinning cheese fondue, steaming blueberry tarts, and all kinds of unfamiliar desserts. The judges, organizers, and every contestant mingled in a relaxed, festive atmosphere. One Durmstrang competitor, of course, had already left Switzerland early for certain well-known reasons. At one table sat Lynn and the two other finalists whose entries had been the most unconventional, Ryan Sanderson and Luc Leclerc. Young people were always quick to strike up friendships once competition was put aside. Luc wiped his mouth with a napkin and in broken English told a Beauxbaton's alchemy anecdote about trying an eternal bloom charm on a rose and accidentally making every plant in the greenhouse dance. Ryan's eyes lit up as he waved his fork and described his dream for the future of the Walkman. Just you wait. This is only the start. I'm going to make it a craze across Ilvermorny, then take it out of the United States and into the whole world. I want every witch and wizard to be able to fly on their brooms while listening to music. His enthusiasm was contagious. Lynn listened and smiled. Then, as if he'd remembered something, he pulled two pre-prepared pocket communicators from his pocket and handed them to Ryan and Luc. Here, he said. I've already saved my contact on them. Now we can call each other anytime, even across the Atlantic. Much more convenient than an owl. They accepted the unexpected gift with surprise and began poking at the devices curiously. Ryan pressed the call button. When Lynn's communicator buzzed in his pocket, both of them grinned like kids. Lynn, of course, hadn't forgotten the main reason he'd come. He moved politely through the judge's table with a glass of juice and gathered the contact details of several masters. The judges were amiable toward the champion. Vasily Orlov patted his shoulder and praised him as a remarkable young man, and even the usually stern Samuel Brooke voiced approval of his standardization ideas. The next morning, first light crested over the lawn where they had arrived. Lynn and Professor Dumbledore stood together, preparing to return to Hogwarts. Professor Dumbledore, aren't Mr. and Mrs. Burns coming with us? Lynn asked, looking around for Edgar's parents. They still have some ministry business to wrap up, Dumbledore explained. This time it's just the two of us. That's great, Lynn blurted, then caught himself and amended hurriedly. No, I mean, that's a pity. Looks like we won't be able to use that, convenient portkey to get back to Hogwarts. He tried to appear sincere. A knowing smile crossed Dumbledore's face. Well, about that, Mr. Lynn, you might be pitying it a little prematurely. Lynn's smile froze. Unhurriedly, Dumbledore produced a very familiar empty beer can from his pocket. For a moment, the world hooked at Lynn's navel. The room spun. The same dizzying sensation that had threatened to send yesterday's cheese fondue back up struck him. I'm back, Lynn shouted, kicking the dormitory door wide. William Smith, reading at his desk, jumped so violently the theory of transfiguration nearly slipped from his hands. He pushed his crooked glasses up and, seeing Lynn, shot him a sharp look. Ollie Thorne, staring out the window, turned and gave a small, impassive nod. Edgar Burns, sprawled on his bed, had the most dramatic reaction. He sat bolt upright, snatched his wand from the pillow, and pointed it angrily toward the doorway. A spell was on the tip of his tongue. Whoa! Chato Matt! Lynn cried, raising his hands and wearing a conciliatory grin. Don't shoot, it's one of your own. Look at the good stuff I brought you. He opened his trunk and started pulling things out like a showman, neatly wrapped Swiss magical chocolates, throat lozenges that promised to make one burst into a temporary yodel, and an assortment of quirky Swiss magical trinkets. At the end, he pressed 3 carefully wrapped packages into their hands. Local specialties and presents, I promised, perfectly practical. After regaling his roommates with vivid tales of his heroic exploits and how he'd won the championship in Switzerland, Lynn felt refreshed. All right, enough bragging. I'm going fishing. He grabbed the fishing rod propped in the corner and set off for the Black Lake in high spirits. Time moved on. The Hogwarts Express, huffing white steam, eased into Hogsmeade Station. The platform filled with farewell calls, parting embraces, and the melancholy bustle of holiday departures. See you next term. Take care. Write to me. Lynn, Edgar, William, and Ollie stood together, luggage at their sides, watching scenes of reluctant goodbyes all around. Lynn scratched his head and in an oddly tentative tone asked, do we have to have a proper farewell like them? Edgar clapped him on the back and grinned. What's there to say goodbye about? It's just Christmas break. Don't be so sentimental. Besides, we've got this champion's treasure. He waved the communicator Lynn had given him. We can call every day and chat anytime. And Lynn, this thing is really useful, much faster than the owls my parents use. You bet, Lynn said, chin lifted and basking in Champion's swagger. A Champion's product is bound to be a masterpiece. Wait until I optimize these, cut production costs, and scale up. I'll take you all with me, and we'll make a fortune. We'll be the business titans of the wizarding world. William and Ollie nodded. William pushed his glasses up and added, It is very convenient. I've heard the Muggle world has similar devices, smartphones, but from what I know, none are as smart as yours. He used the term Lynn had taught them. Indeed, the era-defining smartphone had not yet arrived in the Muggle world in the same way. Lynn's communicator, combining magical short-range calling with portability, was genuinely novel. So what are your holiday plans? Edgar asked the others. William thought for a moment. Probably the usual. I can't use magic outside of school, so I'll spend most of my time reading, getting ahead on next term's lessons, or finding some popular science books to enjoy. His holiday plans were predictably those of a top student, studious and obedient. Ollie nodded, indicating much the same. He might help his father with some paperwork, company business for an 11-year-old. Not envious at all, really. The three turned to Lynn in unison. Me? Hard to say. Depends on my mood, Lynn replied. Maybe I'll travel. Since I'm on my own, what difference does it make where I stay? Chapter 46. Travel Splash. Swish! A stone slammed into the lake, sending a high spray of water into the air. This is a scam! Lynn's angry roar echoed along the shore. He had spent the whole day out here in the biting wind, fishing from dawn to dusk. Not once had he gone back to his warm bed. The result? A nose red from the cold, fingers nearly frozen solid, and not a single fish scale to show for it. Lynn flung the fishing rod to the ground. It bounced twice and rolled to a halt. He couldn't even be bothered to light the stove when he finally went home. He sliced a few pieces of dry bread, slapped on some equally hard butter, and munched them down in silence. Eating this joyless dinner while imagining roast turkey, honey-glazed ham, and pudding wafting from other people's homes made him even grouchier. Lynn looked up at Wuan, who was preening its feathers. Wuan, why can't you cook? Wuan paused, raised its head, and regarded its owner. Master, do you hear yourself? Do you really think that's something a human should say? Despised by his own pet, Lynn curled his lip. Then his eyes drifted around the room and lit on the world map on the wall. He tossed the hard bread into the trash and felt a sudden surge of energy. Wuan, want to go on a trip? Staying here just means wasting time fishing and not even catching anything. I'll go wherever you go, the bird replied. Russia? All cold and vodka. Switzerland? Been there, not exciting anymore. Lynn stroked his chin and let his finger travel across the map until it landed on the country famous for romance. France it is. I heard the food and desserts are amazing. He conveniently ignored the fact that France might also be cold. Having decided, Lynn stomped to the window, pushed it open, let the chill air rush in, and called out into the yard, Lao Ba! After a few seconds, accompanied by a flutter of wings and a few falling feathers, Lao Ba landed right on the back of the chair. What's going on? Opening the window on a day like this? Are you trying to freeze a bird to death? Cut the lecture. I've never heard of a snowy owl freezing to death. I have business. Lynn handed a sealed letter into Lao Ba's talons. Deliver this to the Department of International Magical Cooperation at the Ministry of Magic. Ask for Mr. or Mrs. Burns. You know the way, right? Lao Ba tidied its chest feathers with its beak and yawned. Yeah, I know where it is. I'll deliver it. What's in it? Going abroad to show off again? Hurry up, Lynn patted its head. Lao Ba picked up the letter in its beak, grumbled, so much trouble, and disappeared into the night. A few days later, early in the morning, Lynn stood in the middle of the living room doing a final check on his open trunk. Let's see, wand, check. Change of clothes, check. Broomstick, check. snacks, galleons. He muttered to himself as he inventoried his things. Then he looked at Lao Ba on its perch and said, Lao Ba, keep an eye on the house. I'll be back before school starts. Your treats, dried fish and dried mice, are in the usual spot, and the water's been changed. Don't turn the place into a mess while I'm gone. Lao Ba flapped impatiently. I know. Stop nagging and leave already. Let me get back to sleep. Lynn gave a helpless shake of his head, glanced once more at the house he hadn't spent much time in anyway, and hauled his trunk out the door. He dragged it to the roadside, scanned the empty street, and raised his wand. Bang! A garish purple, triple-decker night bus materialized out of thin air, screeching to a halt with a near drift that clipped a mailbox. The words, "The Night Bus," were painted in crooked gold letters along its side. Startled, Lynn heaved his trunk aboard the tilting bus. A bleary-eyed conductor yawned and asked, Welcome to the night bus. Where to, young sir? The exit checkpoint, Lynn answered, and found a seat that looked relatively steady. Oh, the conductor said, tearing off a ticket. It's rarer than you'd think to see someone your age traveling abroad alone. 11 sickles. Lynn paid, gripped the handrail, and braced himself. Hold on tight, shouted Stan, and the bus roared forward. The world outside the window melted into streaks of color as the bus accelerated, pinning him into his seat. It weaved and leapt over obstacles in a way that made physics groan. Screech! The brakes bit, and Lynn nearly flew into the front row. The bus came to a sudden stop, and the conductor cheered. Exit checkpoint! Have a nice trip, sir! Lynn stepped off pale-faced and wobbly, stomach churning. He planted himself against a stone pillar for a long moment, then, still fuming, made an uncivilized gesture at the fading rear of the night bus. Damn! Why can't underage wizards apparat outside of school during the holidays? Sonic Flight is 1,000 times more comfortable than this junk bus. Which safety-conscious genius came up with this stupid regulation? He grumbled as he straightened his rumpled robes, shouldered his trunk, and went into the Ministry of Magic's immigration checkpoint. The inspection was much simpler and faster than he'd imagined. The staff, clearly used to seeing young witches and wizards travel alone, just checked his exit registration, his wand registration records, and his flu network permit for France. The wand registration and permit were there, thanks to the letter Lao Ba had delivered a few days earlier and to the efficiency of the Burns couple. The inspector waved him through. Standing in front of the row of fireplaces linked to the international flu network, Lynn took a breath and scooped a handful of flu powder. France, Paris, arrival hall. After a brief sensation of spinning and squeezing, he stepped out of a fireplace trimmed in rococo patterns. This beat a certain master's portkey, or that terrible bus, any day. Finally, Lynn set foot on French soil. Beep, 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 beep. A string of urgent notification tones vibrated in Lynn's pocket. It was the ringtone he'd set for his phone, and it sounded almost demanding. He answered, and Edgar's voice came through immediately. Hello, Lynn? Have you landed in France yet? Just now, Lynn replied, hustling his trunk through the crowd. I literally stepped out of the fireplace at the Magic Immigration Office. It's slightly warmer here than Britain. At least the wind isn't cutting into your face. Where are you heading first? William's voice joined in. I'm going to find Luke and visit Beauxbaton to see what it's like. Lynn told them his plan, then hung up the group call. Before he could put the phone away, it chirped again. Luc Leclerc. Lynn, are you in France? Where exactly? I'll come pick you up. Yes, just outside the main gate of the Paris Magic Immigration Office. Lynn glanced around and immediately spotted a familiar figure waving. Oh, there you are. That was quick. Luc met him with a friendly clap on the shoulder. Come on. I'll take you to see Beauxbatons. I'm sure you'll love it. It's nothing like Hogwarts. When Lynn stood before the grand, palace-like gate of Beauxbatons, he almost stopped breathing. The massive, milk-white marble entrance was spectacular. A huge fountain with columns of water that constantly shifted, caught the sunlight, and scattered it in dazzling bursts. Beyond, a wide plaza of smooth stone stretched out toward the main building. The palace itself felt like something from a fairy tale. Light blue, gold, ivory, and cream everywhere. Mirror-smooth marble walls, silk-sheen tapestries, carved reliefs and acanthus patterns, crystal chandeliers, and gilded ornamentation. Compared with Hogwarts' simple, rugged grandeur, this place was bright and refined. How is it? Pretty impressive, isn't it? Luke said, pride plain in his voice. It's definitely more grand than Hogwarts. Brighter, too. Lynn searched for neutral praise and found it. The two of them walked through the gate, chatting as they wandered the spacious sunlit corridors. High ceilings, tapestries depicting enchanted forests and fairy tales, a faint floral scent drifting through the air. Everything felt soft and elegant. By the way, Luck, Lynn asked, remembering, you keep Abraxans here, right? Can I see them? A gentle female voice answered from nearby. Of course, Lynn turned. The woman was enormous, easily a head taller than Hagrid, dressed in black satin robes with an elegant, noble bearing. Abraxans are precious, magical creatures, unique to France, she said with a warm smile. Many visitors come specifically to see them. Good morning, Madame Maxime. Luke greeted her with instant respect. Lynn recognized her immediately as Olympe Maxime, the principal of Beauxbatons, and followed Luke's example. You must be Lynn, Madame Maxime said, nodding. A friend in Switzerland mentioned you, winning the international alchemy competition at such a young age. Quite remarkable. No, you flatter me. It was mostly luck. Lynn surprised himself by being modest. He'd been tempted to say something more blunt, but he kept it simple. Madame Maxime smiled politely, excused herself, her curiosity sated, and drifted away. Luke led Lynn to the Abraxan paddocks. The animals were treated like royalty, vast fields to gallop and stretch their wings, and stable stalls built like little palaces, spacious, clean, and bright. A system notification pinged in Lynn's head as though it were part of the tour. Ding! Task issued. Feed an Abraxan. Reward, 1 Abrag. It will arrive in your hands in a very reasonable manner. Arrive in a very reasonable manner, Lynn thought. That sounded suspiciously vague. Can I feed them? He asked. It'd be a waste not to take the task. Of course, Luke said easily. They're used to being fed by students. Very gentle. Near the stables, piles of top-quality hay and oats sat beside several small wooden buckets. One of the buckets gave off a faint scent of malt whiskey. Lynn picked it up and walked toward the group of Abraxans that were frolicking and shaking their heads. As he approached, a loud, slurred chorus floated over. Wine. Where's the wine? Listen, Hick, last time I flew so fast. I'm not bragging. Hick, my feathers are the brightest. Lynn stopped cold. Several dark, comic lines of dismay seemed to appear on his forehead. Wait, what? These Abraxans were drunk? He cleared his throat and, trying to keep his composure, held out the whiskey-filled bucket. Drinks, he offered. Drink, they replied in near unison. Several Abraxans leaned in at once, eyes fixed on the bucket. One impatiently shoved its long muzzle right into the wood and started slurping. Ding! Task completed. Reward being issued. Please wait patiently. The system chimed again. It actually wanted him to wait. Lynn watched as the nearest Abraxan lifted its head, hiccuped loudly, and announced in a thick, drunken bellow, I'm not drunk, Hick. I can still drink. Another bucket. Wine stained its mane, and it looked as out of control as any old pub-goer at the leaky cauldron. Lynn's expression grew more worried by the second. If the reward, the Abraxan that would reasonably arrive in his hands, was anything like this one, he wasn't sure whether to be amused or alarmed. 48. Return Journey. After staying in France for a few more days, Luke acted as host and took Lynn to the Louvre, the Arc de Triomphe, and Notre Dame, mercifully, before the fire. After sampling authentic French cuisine and buying a few magic supplies unique to the country, Lynn felt satisfied and ready to return to Britain. At the Flu Network hub, though, he ran into news that left him speechless. I'm very sorry, sir, a ministry official in a crisp uniform said with a practiced smile. The main flu line connecting to Britain requires 3 days of emergency maintenance. During this period, all international flu travel will be suspended. We apologize for the inconvenience and ask for your understanding. Lynn stared at him. Everything was fine when I arrived. How can I not go back now? But there was no arguing with ministry announcements. Resigned, he improvised. He rushed to the port city of Saint-Malo, where ferries still ran between France and Britain. It was his first long voyage by ship, and Lynn felt a small thrill at the idea of riding the waves. At night, the cruise ship looked like a small, floating city, docked and lit up. The hatch doors opened slowly and passengers began boarding. Lynn hauled his trunk through the crowd and overheard snippets of conversation. Do you think this bag of Bertie Bott's has an earwax-flavored one? Has you know who really come back? My cousin said Azkaban. Is Honeyduke's new line out yet? I must check when I get home. Lynn glanced around. At least a dozen people nearby were whispering the sort of topics that only wizards talked about. Of course, with the flu down, a lot of witches and wizards had been forced onto the sea route. It was a temporary wizard tour group. Boarding was organized by uniformed crew like an airplane. Ding ding. An announcement chimed through the ship. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. The voyage from St. Malo to Portsmouth is about to depart. Estimated sailing time, approximately 8 hours. We wish you a pleasant journey. Guided by the crew, Lynn found his cabin. He didn't skimp on comfort and had booked a deluxe suite, a roomy living area, a large viewing window facing the dark sea and distant port lights, though at night the view was mostly black, a well-stocked wine cabinet, and a TV. The bedroom had a comfortable double bed and a neat dressing table, which he doubted he'd use. Lynn glanced at the mirror and decided he wasn't refined enough to need it yet. After stowing his luggage, he went to the dining area. The food was excellent, certainly better than the plain bread and butter he'd been surviving on at home. Later, he watched a film in the ship's cinema and tried a few arcade games. When it grew late, he headed back to his cabin. In the corridor, a small shape flashed past a corner ahead. A pony? Lynn paused. No, the size, the color, an Abraxan foal? Why would there be one on a passenger ship? Before he could think further, his alert charm, Peter's Jolt, blared. 2 spells whistled down the corridor. Lynn dove aside by instinct. The bolts grazed the hem of his robes and slammed into the wall where he had just been standing, leaving 2 charred marks. Familiar dread tightened his chest. He spun, wand already in hand, scanning the corridor. 2 figures in black robes waited at the other end, hoods shadowing their faces. One was tall and thin, the other short and squat. His pupils constricted in recognition. The 2 dark wizards he'd fought in the Forbidden Forest, the ones who had been sent to Azkaban. How had they gotten out? There was no time to puzzle it out. Lynn ripped a palm-sized metal disc from his robes and flicked it. An invisible barrier bloomed around him, silent as a held breath, a silent barrier generator, one he'd built himself. The gadget created a temporary soundproof sphere. Noise inside couldn't escape. It was useful when you wanted a private fight. Protego, torrential impact, Expelliarmus. He struck fast, firing the combination of spells he knew they'd dread. This time, he augmented every offensive charm with the immortal curse. The compressed water spell roared like a sea dragon down the corridor toward them. The short, fat wizard's face contorted in a wild recognition. That water again! It's that brat! Ah! He tried to dodge, but was clipped by the spray. The impact shoved him back, and simultaneously, a cold, bone-deep curse began to eat at him, sharp and relentless. He stumbled, weakening, pain lancing through him. The tall, gaunt wizard seized up, fury burning in him. He began firing spells blindly, red and green bolts cutting the air and cursing under his breath. But Lynn, warned by Peter's Jolt and guided by the uncanny coordination of 100 skeletons, one heart, moved as if in a dance. He dodged every shot with a casual fluidity, the narrow corridor his stage. Seeing his attacks fail, the tall wizard went white with rage. He raised his wand, eyes flashing with cruelty, and began the incantation, Cruci. Before he finished, Lynn's wand was already pointed at him. Cruciatus curse, he shouted, and layered it with another immortal curse for measure. The tall wizard never managed to unleash his spell. Pain hit him in a wave like a thunderbolt. He writhed as if countless needles were stabbing him from within. The silver-blue light of his half-formed Crucio shot wildly off course and struck the ceiling. He collapsed, thrashing and howling, grotesque in his agony. For a moment, the 2 of them rolled on the floor, twisted and shrieking. Lynn stood over them, calm, and said slowly, "It seems Azkaban's cuisine didn't improve your manners. What, did you break out just to be my punching bags again?" 49. Enough. Lynn stared down at the 2 men he had tied up, writhing, struggling figures pinned to the floor, and hesitated. What should he do with them? Throw them to the sea as squid bait? That felt needlessly brutal. Hand them over to the ship's security? If there was a mole in the Ministry of Magic, there could easily be traitors in the ship's security too. He needed a plan. He stepped closer and jabbed the taller, thinner wizard with his wand. The man's mouth was stuffed with a smelly sock Lynn had conjured earlier. He could only make muffled whimpers. "Oh, right," Lynn said without a trace of apology, flicking the wand to pull the socks free. The man gagged and spat, face white. You, spit it out," Lynn snapped. "How did you get out of Azkaban? You didn't break out on your own." "I won't believe that," Lynn added, impatient. Well, it's because—" The tall man's eyes darted. He clearly didn't want to say the truth. The tip of Lynn's wand glowed red. He let the menace hang a beat, drawing the word out. "Cruci." "All right, I'll talk. The man broke, babbling everything as if beans were spilling from a bamboo tube. "We bribed a ministry official. We paid him a huge sum of galleons. He forged our papers and let us slip out during an outer perimeter patrol." So there was a mole in the ministry. Handing these two over would likely mean delivering them straight back out the back door. That wasn't an option. Wuan. A ripple ran through the air beside him like heat on water, and then Wuan materialized, graceful and luminous. Her skin radiated a warm glow, and she tilted her head, voice crisp. "Master, what is it?" "Seal these two up first, then take them to the trunk and lock them away somewhere separate," Lynn said, pointing at the terrified wizards. Wuan spread her shimmering wings. In an instant, the temperature dropped. Tiny ice crystals formed in the air. A silver-white frost gathered on her feathers, a chill that looked as if it could freeze the soul. "No, please," the men screamed. Wuan flapped once. The sound of bone-deep freezing cut through the room. Frost raced over the two men's bodies, turning them into ice sculptures forever frozen in terror. The ropes turned to brittle ice. Their magical signatures were sealed tight. "I'll take them away first, Master." Wuan picked up the statues with delicate claws. "Good. Go on back. Nice work." Lynn nodded. "Heh." With a cheerful chirp, Wuan and the two iced figures became points of light and vanished into the undetectable extension trunk, the special pocket of space he kept aboard the ship. With that problem handled, Lynn turned his attention to the corner where a small Abraxan had disappeared. He softened his expression and made a coaxing sound, like calling a skittish animal. "Here, boy, come out. It's safe now." A rustle, then a silver-white head peered around the corner. The foal's mane shone like moonlight. Its large eyes were wary but curious. "You calling me?" It lifted a forehoof uncertainly. Thanks to language mastery, Lynn understood every nuance. He crouched to seem non-threatening. "Yes, come over. Don't be afraid. I won't hurt you." The foal padded forward in small, tentative steps. "You saved me. Thank you," it said in the crisp voice of a young Abraxan. "You're welcome. I'm Lynn. What's your name?" "Lumiere." The name fit, soft and familiar. Lynn's unprecedented affinity with magical creatures had clearly helped put the little one at ease. He stroked Lumiere's smooth neck. "How did you end up getting picked on by those two?" Lumiere lowered his head, embarrassed, pawing the carpet. "I smelled alcohol in the woods. It smelled so nice. I snuck out to taste some, and then they found me." Lynn massaged his temple. "Of course, Abraxans and alcohol. Even the foals. Where do you live? Which herd?" Lumiere shook his head, eyes blank. "I don't know. I've been lost for a long time. I can't remember home." Lynn blinked. An amnesiac, drunken foal. He thought for a second. He had plenty of animals already. One more wouldn't be a burden. "How would you like to come live with me?" Lumiere's eyes lit up. "Is there alcohol to drink?" Lynn's mouth twitched, but he nodded. "All you can drink." The foal rubbed his head against Lynn's hand so fast it was obvious he'd been waiting for that answer. Just then, the familiar ping sounded inside Lynn's head. Ding! Reward distribution complete. Lynn stared at the little Abraxan who'd sold himself for a promise of drinks and then muttered under his breath, furious. "Wait, what? System, explain yourself. I picked this up with my own ability, okay? Don't hand out rewards that fast. Girlfriends." Girlfriends. Glug, 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 glug. In the living room of the luxury cabin, Lumiere had his head buried in an open wine barrel, the sound of hearty swallowing echoing through his throat. The bottle of aged wine, according to the label from some magical vineyard in Burgundy, was disappearing at a speed anyone could see. Burp. Finally, Lumiere lifted his head and let out a long, satisfied belch. Deep red stains flecked his silver mane. He licked his lips and looked expectantly at Lynn. "Is there any more? This is really good." Lynn stared at his wine cabinet, where several slots had suddenly become empty, and his eye twitched. He began to seriously consider whether keeping this Abraxan was worth it. At this rate, half his savings, enough to squander for 3 lifetimes, would be gone before the horse hit retirement. You really aren't drunk? Yes, I'm perfectly sober, Lumiere declared immediately, planting his head high. To prove it, he began to spin in place. Look, I'll spin for you. I can even walk a straight line. Whoa. He'd spun too vigorously. His 4 long legs seemed to have minds of their own, tangled under him as his body swayed. Thud. Attempting a triumphant first step to demonstrate his sobriety, he tripped and fell sideways onto the soft carpet with a dull thump. Almost immediately, he started snoring. Youth, fall asleep the moment your head hits the ground. Lynn looked at the instantly unconscious Lumiere and sighed. He had promised to keep him. He'd follow through, even if it made him cry. Lynn waved his wand and used a levitation charm to lift the sleeping wine barrel, then opened the inconspicuous, magically expanded trunk again. The space inside was far larger than the case suggested. Lynn had divided it into several areas: a living space, a materials storeroom, a potion workshop, an alchemy lab, and even a large simulated natural environment. Several magical plants thrived under the effects of bountiful harvest. Perched on a tall parasol tree inside, Wuan preened her tail feathers leisurely. Seeing Lynn, she let out a crisp cry, fluttered down, and landed in front of him. Master, you're back? She paused mid-sentence, eyes fixed on the silver creature floating behind Lynn under the levitation charm. Master, is this, a new member? Sensing unfamiliar voices and a presence, the floating Lumiere blinked dizzily, shook his still groggy head, and looked around. Where are we? Why is everything spinning? You woke up at the right time. Lynn set Lumiere down on the grass. Let me introduce you. This is Wuan, a phoenix, and mine. This is Lumiere, an Abraxan. Well, a newcomer. Get to know each other. I'm tired. Going back to sleep. Lynn yawned and left them to it. Oh, and Lumiere, there's plenty of space here. Feel free to wander and pick a spot for your nest. Without waiting for a reply, he closed the trunk lid and left it shut. Quiet returned to the cabin. Lynn flopped onto the large soft bed and thought, I have to get off the ship early tomorrow. I hope they can actually get along in there. Lugging the trunk, he returned to the front of his house. He pressed his palm to a small rune on the door. Beep. Identity authenticated. Welcome back. Dear Quiba. The lock clicked and the door swung open. The response time was still a little slow, about a 3-second delay, Lynn thought. He'd have to optimize the access circuit later. He stepped into the living room with the trunk in hand, and the sight stopped him cold. The relaxed smile of coming home froze on his face. The usually tidy living room had been turned into a mess. Cushions were scattered and dotted with various feathers. The silver fruit tray on the coffee table had been overturned, its carefully arranged magical fluorites now rolling across the table and floor in a chaotic glow. His favorite wool rug bore several stains that looked suspiciously like claw marks. The air carried a faint avian scent. A vein twitched on Lynn's forehead. He set the trunk down and called at the top of his lungs, Lao Ba! A flurry of flapping wings answered. Lao Ba flew down from the second-floor railing and landed on the chandelier, tilting his head and cooing. Coo, 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 coo. Lynn crossed his arms and sneered. Cut the act. I speak owl, remember? Stop playing dumb and explain this. I was out for a few days, and you turned the house into a birdhouse. What happened? Playing dumb didn't work. Lao Ba shifted his claws on the chandelier, eyes skittering. Well, this stuff, cough, cuff, I was catching mice. You have no idea. The mice were so arrogant while you were gone. Pa. Lynn spat his disbelief. Keep making things up. Do you think I wouldn't know if there were mice? I set repelling and scouring charms before I left for school. Forget mice. Cockroaches would have to detour around this place. Give me the honest story. Lao Ba dropped his head, wings folding sheepishly. His voice shrank and carried guilt. Well, I invited my girlfriends over. He deliberately slurred the plural. Girlfriend? Plural. Lynn blinked and then remembered a crucial question. Whose girlfriends? I'm the only wizard on this block. Where did you find so many owls? Lao Ba puffed up with a bit of misplaced pride. Heh, they're from your friends' houses. The brown wood owl from Edgar's, the barn owl from Williams, and Ollie's. I didn't ask her exact breed. Lynn felt his head fill with black lines. Good grief. Even a rabbit doesn't nibble the grass around its own burrow. You specifically went and ate the whole field. Are you trying to make sure everyone knows that the owl Lynn raised is a philanderer? Lauba muttered. Well, when feelings come, you can't stop them. Seeing Lauba's sheepish "I know I was wrong" expression, Lynn was half angry, half amused. He rubbed the bridge of his nose and gave in to exasperation. Fine, fine. Stop looking pitiful. If you ever turn my house into a bird bazaar again, I'll cut off your jerky for a month. No, this time it's half a month. I know. I promise there won't be another time. Lauba flapped his wings in earnest. What choice did Lynn have? He'd raise the bird. He'd keep it, even if it cost him trouble. He sighed, rolled up his sleeves, and began restoring the battlefield that love and parties had left behind. As he cleaned, Lynn wondered whether he should give Lauba some form of emotional education or something more permanent. Chase! Slam! Slam! Hoo! 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 In Lynn's bedroom, his steady breathing filled the space. Cleaning up the mess, Old 8 and its gaggle had left the night before had truly worn him out. Beep, 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 beep. A rapid, insistent ringing shattered the silence of the late morning. No, it was already noon. Lynn fumbled groggily at the bedside until he finally caught the vibrating phone. He hit the answer button without opening his eyes. Hello, who is it? His voice dripped with sleep and the irritation of being disturbed. Why do you sound so half asleep? Lynn, you haven't gotten up yet, have you? Edgar's familiar voice exploded down the line, disbelief written all over it. Yeah, what's up? Still not fully registering the urgency, Lynn rolled over, buried his face in the pillow, and mumbled something indistinct. What's wrong? School starts today? The Hogwarts Express leaves at 11. It's nearly noon. I've been waiting at the station forever. Where are you? Are you still playing dead at home? Those keywords, school, train, 11, fell over Lynn like a bucket of ice water. He jerked upright, all sleep gone. He shoved aside the curtains and saw the sun high in the sky. It was definitely past noon. It's over. The train left at 11 on the dot. It had to be gone. Of course, it was that blasted Old 8's fault. Cleaning up its hoard without magic until the middle of the night had made him sleep right through the morning. Old 8, where are you? Get in the trunk, now. Lynn barked into the room as he scrambled into his robes. He skipped washing up, shoved essentials into the undetectable extension trunk at top speed, checked his wand, grabbed his modified high-performance broom, and slammed out the door. In the yard, he vaulted onto the broom and poured magic into it. The propulsion runes at the tail flared to life with a low hum. Whoosh! Lynn shot into the sky, chasing the Hogwarts Express at full throttle. The wind screamed in his ears, whipping his sleep-tousled hair. Towns, fields, and hills streaked past beneath him like a fast-forwarded film. The speed sent adrenaline surging, and he couldn't help shouting, Wahoo! On the ground, passers-by looked up. Did you hear that? Sounds like someone shouting, one said. I didn't hear anything. You're imagining things, another replied. Blimey, there's someone flying on a broom, a keen-eyed onlooker cried, pointing. Where? I see nothing. By the time the others turned, only a faint trail hung in the sky. Beep, auxiliary disillusionment charm activated, the broom's onboard system prompted. Lynn exhaled. Whew, that's a close one. Thanks to the broom's compact size, blistering speed, and the timely disillusionment charm, hardly anyone saw him. Those who thought they had probably just blamed the sun or their imagination. Beep, 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 the phone rang again. Lynn steadied the broom with one hand and answered with the other. Hey, where are you? We're all on the train. What the? Edgar's voice shifted from worried to a shocked shout. He must have seen Lynn chasing the train through his phone camera. You're chasing the train on a broom? Merlin's fattest underwear. You, Lynn started. Yeah, I'll be catching up to your carriage. See you in a bit. He cut Edgar off and hung up. You can't properly answer a call while driving. Flying a broom was no different. Lynn wasn't exactly a law-abiding role model, but he did believe in safe flying. Inside one compartment of the Hogwarts Express, a sudden shout set everyone milling toward a window. Look, outside! Students pressed to the glass and saw a figure in Hufflepuff robes, broom in hand, flying alongside the train at the same speed, robes whipping wildly. Merlin, who is that? Looks like a Hufflepuff. Is he mad? This is dangerous. Lynn spotted Edgar's carriage, nudged the broom closer, and reached out. Knock, knock, knock. He tapped on the closed window. Edgar, William, and Ollie stared at the grinning face pressed to the glass. William and a couple of others hastily popped the window open. Lynn whooshed in through the gap, landed on the compartment floor, and stowed his broom. Whew, finally caught up! He dusted himself off and flashed his three roommates a bright, punchable grin. How's it going, everyone? Miss me over the holidays? Our new Hufflepuff alchemy champ and future Quidditch star chose a distinctive entrance, someone drawled. At that voice, Lynn's grin froze. Professor Snape stood in the doorway. Behind him, Cass Carrow was half out of the corridor, grinning nastily, his face all delighted malice. Snape's tone was dry and cutting. Mr. Lynn, are you surprised to see a professor? Do you imagine the windows of the Hogwarts Express are a convenient entrance reserved for students who enjoy showboating? He didn't wait for Lynn to answer. In light of Mr. Lynn's extremely dangerous behavior and clear breach of school rules, 50 points will be deducted from Hufflepuff. Not finished, Snape added. Additionally, a week's detention. I trust Professor Sprout will have no objection to the minor punishment her outstanding student has earned. With that, he swept out of the compartment without looking back. As Snape left, Carrow pushed the door wider, jabbed a finger at Lynn, and sneered in that irritating, triumphant tone of his. Serves you right, alchemy champion? More like a brute. Wait till you're scrubbing flobberworms till you puke mud. He didn't get to finish. Lynn's hand flashed. His wand was out of his robes in an instant. The smugness froze on Carrow's face and crumpled into terror. The rest of his insult died in his throat. Instead, he spat a hollow, forced threat, then bolted from the compartment, faster than a golden snitch. Silence settled. Edgar, William, and Ollie looked at Lynn with a mixture of sympathy and disbelief. William pushed up his glasses and sighed. First day back, 50 points and a week's detention. Lynn, good luck. Chapter 52. No one will escape. Carrying the gloom of having 50 points docked and a week of detention on the very first day back at school, Lynn trudged back to the Hufflepuff dormitory. He dropped the crate he'd been carrying and collapsed into the armchair by the door. Does anyone understand my pain, family? The first day back, caught red-handed by that old bat, 50 points, a week of detention, my heart is absolutely freezing. William, who was tidying textbooks at his desk, didn't even look up. He pushed his glasses up his nose and delivered the coup de grace. You deserved it. Who told you to oversleep and then board the train in such an obvious way? At least Snape didn't make you serve detention tonight. Edgar tried to console, but it had little effect. He changed the subject quickly. Anyway, forget the gloom. You went to France. Did you bring anything back besides trouble and point deductions? Any proper souvenirs? Like something good to eat? At that prompt, Lynn brightened immediately, the gloom swept away by a self-satisfied smile. Heh, it's France. Of course I brought back some very special goods. All three roommates leaned in, intrigued. What kind of special goods? Edgar pressed. You didn't by any chance abduct one of Beauxbaton's Abraxons, did you? He meant it as a joke. Ollie, who had been quietly polishing an old photo frame by the window, said calmly, maybe he did. Lynn fell silent for a beat. The others stared at him. William's eyes widened behind his lenses. Ollie? Guessed it? Well, sort of, Lynn admitted, scratching the back of his head. Strictly speaking, I didn't steal it from Beauxbaton's. I found it on the road. It went like this. Lynn proceeded to tell the tale, how he'd run into two dark wizards on the ferry and how he had rescued a little Abraxon who'd supposedly been trafficked. Naturally, he added plenty of flair, painting himself as brave, brilliant, and altruistic. So that's how it happened. Want to see it? It's very lively. Yes, the three said in unison. Lynn opened the crate. A lock on the floor clicked softly and the lid eased open. First out flew Wuan, who landed lightly on Lynn's shoulder, nuzzled his cheek with its beak, and chirped, Master. A small silvery white head poked out next, Lumiere, smelling faintly of alcohol. It looked half asleep and a little glassy-eyed, but the moment it saw Lynn, it brightened and called impatiently, Lynn! Wine! Didn't you say there'd be plenty? I'm about ready to taste everything in here. Lynn's face went instantly blank. Edgar stared at the Abraxon with its beak buried in a miniature wine cask, then asked slowly, Lynn, is it really okay for it to drink like that? Lynn sighed in surrender. Theoretically, yes, it won't die from drinking. At worst, it'll walk wobbly. He watched Lumiere take a small, lurching step and added, "From what I've seen, the Abraxan kind might just have alcohol running through their veins." Night. Lynn finally emerged from the potions office, having finished his week of detention, time spent elbow-deep in slugs and toad innards. He breathed a long, blessed breath. Even the rusty armor lining the corridor smelled fresh. Freedom. Pushing open the dormitory door, he immediately noticed the room felt off. Edgar, William, and Ollie weren't reading or chatting. They sat slumped on their beds and chairs, shoulders drooped, faces drawn with a strange mix of gloom, frustration, and exhaustion. Lynn raised an eyebrow. "What's wrong, my dear friends? Your most heroic brother, just released from a long sentence, is back. Aren't you supposed to be celebrating my freedom? Why does everyone look like a troll stepped on their toes?" A chorus of synchronized sighs answered him. Lynn looked bewildered and stepped between them. "So, what happened?" Edgar looked up miserably and began the tale. "We went for a night walk and got caught by Professor McGonagall." "A night walk?" Lynn repeated, baffled. William, unusually red-faced, muttered, "We ran into Professor McGonagall on her patrol while we were heading out." Ollie nodded, eyes full of regret. Lynn summed it up. "So while I was suffering in the dungeon, the three of you went for a night walk, marched right into McGonagall, and got detention too?" "That's right," Edgar admitted, then tried to find a silver lining. "But she only docked 20 points from each of us, way less than yours." Lynn didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "The pot calling the kettle black." "Ha," he said. "Fine, at least the Brotherhood of Misfortune grows. So what is your detention? Helping Snape gut slugs too?" Edgar shook his head, fear edging his voice. "No, Professor McGonagall assigned us to patrol the Forbidden Forest with Hagrid tomorrow night." William added, "And she said there will be students from other houses punished with us." "Which poor souls were unlucky enough to be caught too?" Lynn asked. William grimaced. "I've got a thing about the Forbidden Forest. I've been there twice. Once I ran into poachers, and once I ran into a Weasley. I'm really hoping I don't meet anything this time." 53. Unforgettable. "Lynn, we're gonna buy oranges. You stay here and don't move." Edgar mimicked the exact tone Lynn had taught him, grinning as he said it. Lynn waved him off irritably. "Go, go, go. Go serve your detention. Keep running your mouth, and watch out. The Acromantula in the Forbidden Forest might think you talk too much and wrap you up as mummy snack." He immediately regretted telling Edgar about the buying oranges line from the East. It had come up in a late-night conversation when Edgar was curious about what Lynn had studied in the schools of the Eastern Muggle world. Lynn hadn't actually attended any of those schools in this life, but that didn't stop him from inventing details to feed the system. "Chinese language? Is that just learning Chinese? Do you just learn to recognize characters?" Edgar had asked innocently. Lynn had improvised, half true, half fiction, and even rewrote Juicy King's "The Sight of My Father's Back" on the spot to emphasize the absurd "buying oranges" snippet. Edgar found it hilarious and kept repeating it. Watching Edgar, William, and Ollie head out of the dormitory for detention, Lynn felt bored. After a moment, he retreated into his system interface to bond with his pet. At the castle gates, the caretaker Filch limped along with a dim oil lamp, followed by a rather motley detention party. Hufflepuff's Edgar, William, and Ollie, Slytherin's Draco Malfoy, and the Gryffindor trio, Harry, Ron, and Hermione. The 7 of them looked small and outnumbered in the night. "Keep up quickly," Filch rasped, using his most unpleasant tone as he marched them across the grounds. "Punishments are far too lenient these days. Back in my day, misbehaving students were hung from the dungeon ceiling and whipped with barbed lashes. I truly miss those times." Filch's complaining trailed off as Hagrid came into view by his hut at the edge of the Forbidden Forest. "They're all yours, Hagrid. Their task is to follow you and patrol the forest." Filch said no more, turned, and limped back toward the castle's shadow. Hagrid looked at the students, rubbed his huge hands together, and said bluntly, "Norbert's gone. Dumbledore sent him to the Dragon Sanctuary in Romania." Edgar and the others froze. "Norbert? Who?" Hermione stepped forward quickly, trying to comfort the half-giant. "Isn't that wonderful? It can be with its own kind." Edgar nudged Malfoy. Besides his roommates, Malfoy was the only face he half recognized. So, you were raising a dragon before? Is that why you got detention? Malfoy snorted. Ha! Those idiotic Gryffindors were raising the dragon. Now I'm dragged into this. This place is filthy and dangerous. His complaints drew an immediate retort from Ron, whose temper flared along with his hair. Shut up, Malfoy. If you hadn't run off to tattle to Professor McGonagall, how would we have been found out and gotten this blasted detention? Who are you calling a snitch, poor Weasley? Malfoy shot back. You are. Coward, Malfoy. The two bickered loudly until Hagrid cut in. Enough. Quiet down. We need to move. They set off into the forest. At night, the Forbidden Forest felt far more sinister than in daylight. Branches seemed like monster claws, and rustling and distant cries made the hair on the back of everyone's neck stand up. Fang pressed close to Hagrid's leg, tail tucked, letting out occasional anxious whimpers. They hadn't gone far when Hagrid halted and trained his lantern on the ground. Something sticky, silver blue in the moonlight, soaked the fallen leaves and mud. That's unicorn blood. Hagrid's voice dropped. A few days ago, we found a dead unicorn, completely drained. Now there's another fresh patch. Today we've got to find the poor creature and see if it can be saved. He began to divide them into search parties. So, we'll split up to cover more ground. Ron, Hermione, Harry, and I will be one group, and the rest of you? Why should we? Malfoy interrupted, shrill and panicked. You want a bunch of kids to follow this stupid dog into the depths of the Forbidden Forest? Are you insane? I'm going to write to my father and have you fired. This is murder. Hagrid tried different arrangements, putting Malfoy in his own group, rearranging people, but Malfoy refused every option with excuses about not liking Gryffindor, being afraid of Fang, or claiming routes were dangerous. The standoff only stalled the whole operation. Then we'll leave it to luck. Hermione said, exasperated. She stooped, snapped a few small twigs from the ground, and hid them behind her back. Draw lots. Those who pull the long twig go with Hagrid. Those who draw the short twig go with Fang. Is that acceptable, Malfoy? Malfoy glowered at the twigs, but couldn't find another objection. He grunted and gave in. Under the weak lamp, the lot was drawn. Malfoy, Harry, William, Edgar, and Fang were one group. Ron, Hermione, and Ollie went with Hagrid. Malfoy stared at the short twig in his hand, displeased, but since he'd agreed to the method, there was nothing more to be done. All right, it's settled. Fang, lead the way. Hagrid patted the dog and set off with his group in the other direction. The Fang squad, 4 students and a dog, pressed deeper into the forest. Malfoy complained the whole way. This is servants' work, filthy and dangerous. If my father knew, he'd have Hagrid fired, and maybe even Dumbledore. You're just scared, aren't you, Malfoy? Harry said quietly beside him. For once, Malfoy had no sharp retort. He only clenched his device tightly. Edgar and William didn't join the exchange. Both gripped their own devices just as tightly. William even produced a small feather. They had agreed, if things went wrong, the feather would be their signal to Lynn for backup. Without Lynn's near-instant warning system, they had to be extra cautious. Fang led them over twisted roots and through tight clearings, snuffling the ground and air, a low whine rumbling in his throat. The trees closed in, moonlight breaking into scattered patches. Then Fang dropped suddenly to a crouch and fixed his stare on a small clearing ahead. The group followed his gaze, and what they saw became a memory burned into their minds, a ragged, black-cloaked figure hunched over the body of a unicorn. The thing had its face buried in the unicorn's neck, making sucking sounds. Ah! Malfoy's scream shattered the forest silence. At the same instant, William flicked the feather, and the signal was sent. Chapter 54. A model wizard who embodies the 5 stresses, 4 beauties, and 3 loves. On this side of the clearing, Lynn was conducting what he called serious scientific research, testing a phoenix's tolerance for alcohol. He stroked Wuan's feathers with one hand and held a glass bottle of amber liquid up to her beak with the other. Wuan, want a sip? I hear fire whiskey goes great with a phoenix. Maybe you'll breathe flames with a hint of alcohol? Wuan lifted her head, eyes full of disdain. She twisted her neck almost completely around, presenting the back of her head to Lynn and the bottle, her meaning unmistakable. No, drinking. Just as Lynn was about to keep teasing her, Wuan snapped her head back. Master, Edgar and the others are in danger. They've activated the feather. The playfulness drained from Lynn's face. His eyes narrowed, and without hesitation he said, "Let's go." Over in the Forbidden Forest, the black-robed figure bent over the unicorn's neck was startled by Malfoy's scream and looked up sharply. His face was lost in the shadows of his hood, but pure malice radiated from him. He'd been interrupted mid-feeding. He raised his wand and pointed it at the nearest person, William. Avada Kedavra! Almost at the same instant, the air beside William rippled violently, and a spell shot out even before a figure fully formed. Expelliarmus! A brilliant red light burst from the rippling air and met the black-robed man's curse head-on. The green flash of the killing curse and the red glow of the Expelliarmus collided in midair. They didn't cancel each other out. They locked together like two wrestling snakes, erupting sparks and a terrifying sizzle that sent leaves flying. Edgar and the others scrambled behind trees, watching the duel of spells with hearts hammering. The black-robed man hadn't expected such a precise, rapid counterattack. Even more shocking to him was the unique spatial fluctuation. An apparition, he realized. It's a phoenix apparition. Has Dumbledore arrived? Leave quickly. A raspy voice whispered in his mind. Yes, master. The black-robed man didn't linger. He severed his connection to the Expelliarmus, and his body exploded into a cloud of rolling black mist, melting into the dark forest until he vanished. Only then did the spatial ripples stabilize completely. Lynn stepped forward with calm composure, Wuan perched on his shoulder, her body glowing with a faint golden-red halo that drove back some of the surrounding chill. Thank you, Lynn. You came just in time. And you too, Wuan. William peered from behind a tree, pale but grateful. Before Lynn could answer, Malfoy's voice rang out, incredulous. This is a phoenix. Merlin, it's really a phoenix. Lynn turned and blinked at the stunned Malfoy, an expression that plainly said, What nonsense are you talking about? Huh, Malfoy, why are you here? What phoenix? You must be so scared you're hallucinating, right? As he spoke, Lynn flicked his wand and silently cast a disillusionment charm on Wuan. The bird on his shoulder instantly blurred and grew transparent until she merged with the air. Malfoy pointed at Lynn's shoulder and halfway through, watched in disbelief as the magnificent bird vanished. Malfoy froze, then exploded with anger. That phoenix, Lynn, do you take me for a fool? Do you really think I didn't see such an obvious spell cast? He spun to find an ally and snapped toward Harry. Potter saw it too, right, Potter? But Harry was curled on the ground, clutching his scar in pain. He was deathly pale and sweating. Clearly he hadn't seen anything. Looks like he didn't, Lynn shrugged. Anyway, it isn't safe here. You should find Hagrid or head back to the castle and tell the professor what happened. I'm leaving. I don't want another detention for being out at night or for any other reason. He ignored the fuming Malfoy, signaled to Wuan, and within an instant, Lynn, the now invisible phoenix, and the unicorn's body were wrapped in spatial ripples and vanished without a trace, leaving the shaken group and a gnashing Malfoy convinced he'd seen a phoenix inside the shimmering space. Lynn crouched beside the dying unicorn. As an alchemist and potion enthusiast, his mind immediately started cataloging. A unicorn's horn is a top-tier alchemical ingredient. Its blood has powerful protective and purifying properties, and its tail hair makes an excellent wand core. These were priceless. He even set out tools, prepared to collect materials as soon as the unicorn breathed its last. Ding! Mission issued. Save the unicorn. Reward: Silver Glow Flow. Effect: can delay the onset of curses on a target, quickly stabilize injuries, and significantly accelerate the natural healing speed of wounds. You are a qualified nanny, crossed out healer. Ding! Mission issued. Obtain the unicorn's body tissues. Reward: Final Ebon Erosion. Effect: can accelerate the onset and effects of curses on a target, causing their injuries to worsen drastically in a very short time and preventing any form of wound healing. You are also a qualified poison healer. Lynn stared at the two starkly opposed mission options, then at the weak unicorn, and felt his mouth twitch. System. Who do you think I am? He thought. Kill a unicorn for rewards? Was that the kind of thing a model wizard like him, who followed the 5 stresses, 4 beauties, and 3 loves, would do? He was sly and liked money, sometimes unscrupulous, but he still had a bottom line. Probably he had one. Sigh. Consider yourself lucky you ran into someone soft-hearted, he muttered, putting away thoughts of harvesting parts. He pointed his wand at the unicorn's wound without further hesitation. Blessing of the Hogwarts white flower. A soft white light enveloped the injury. Though it couldn't instantly undo the trauma, the wound, bleeding and held open by a curse, stopped bleeding. The pain and other negative sensations seemed temporarily muted. The unicorn, which had been twitching, relaxed somewhat. Lynn leaned in, frowning. Hiss, how cruel, truly cruel. With his knowledge, he could identify several vicious curses wrapped around the wound. The putrefaction curse, preventing healing, a soul-siphoning charm, eroding life force, and a tangle of other dark enchantments he didn't recognize. At least 7 or 8 debuffs stacked here. They really went for the kill. Let's save it, Wuan. Sigh, why am I so hopelessly soft that I can't stand to see this? He mentally pushed aside the fact that moments earlier he'd almost broken out his tools to harvest the creature. Okay, master, Wuan chirped and glided to the unicorn's side. She lowered her head, and a single tear slipped from the corner of her eye onto the wound. Sizzle! The second the tear touched the injury, a burst of black energy was forced out with a faint corrosive sound. The curses that bound the wound began to dissolve under the purifying power of the phoenix's tear. Wuan then spread her wings. Her entire body flared with warm, brilliant light. She lifted her neck and sang, a rhythmic chord filled with life and purification. The ethereal, sacred melody echoed through the clearing. The light flowed like living water, bathing the unicorn's whole body and concentrating on the wound at its neck. Under the song and the luminous wash, necrotic tissue oozing from the dark enchantments sloughed away. Fresh flesh slowly regrew, and the silver-white coat began to regain its luster. Hakitong, you really ding. Task completed. Silver glow flow has been issued. Good work, Wuan. Lynn gently patted the phoenix's wings. Wuan nuzzled his fingers and trilled, "Heh! It wasn't hard. I'm just glad I could help, master," and its voice trailed off in contentment. Lynn looked at the unicorn before him. Its breathing had steadied. It was no longer on the brink of death. He nodded, but it still felt risky. Following his principle of seeing things through, he pulled several bottles and jars from his pocket. Come on, you just recovered from a serious illness. You need to nourish your body. Muttering to himself, Lynn uncorked a bottle of shimmering, iridescent, nutritional potion and poured out some tonic that smelled like sunshine. He added half a bottle of cheering potion. After an ordeal like that, the unicorn needed a little psychological comfort. Carefully propping its head up, he tipped the potions to its lips. Gulp, gulp, the liquid slid down its throat. Soon the effect set in. The unicorn's previously faint aura grew noticeably stronger. Its eyelashes fluttered, and it opened its eyes, dazed. Where? Is this? A thin, slightly trembling female voice asked. Lynn's mischievous side surfaced instantly. He leaned in and said in a deadpan tone, You're awake? Congratulations, the surgery was a success. You're now a cute boy. Startled by the voice and the figure leaning over it, the unicorn struggled to its feet. Its limbs were still weak, but it kept a wary stance. It looked around, confusion and fear in its eyes. This isn't the Forbidden Forest. Where is that terrifying wizard who is chasing me? Who? Relax, relax. Lynn spread his hands to show he meant no harm. This is my room. It's very safe. That dark figure who chased you has already fled. As for who I am, Lynn straightened and adopted an exceptionally righteous tone. I am your savior. If I hadn't shown up in time and risked everything to snatch you back from death's door, you would already be joining your ancestors. He gestured at the empty bottles scattered on the floor. Look, these are all precious potions, and I used them all on you. Savior, the unicorn murmured. It glanced at the broken bottles, felt strength returning, and noticed the wound on its neck, still sore but purified and healing. Wariness softened into gratitude and something like embarrassment. Thank you. I will repay your kindness. Oh, please. Lynn waved a hand grandly, putting on a magnanimous smile. Don't talk about repayment. That's too formal. We have a saying in the East, saving a beast's life is better than building a 9-story pagoda. Of course, if you insist on showing your appreciation, galleons or sickles, I won't be picky. The unicorn fell silent for a moment, seeming to make a decision. Then it lowered its head. The spiraled horn on its forehead, symbol of purity and magic, glowed faintly. As if ripened, it detached cleanly from the base and fell lightly to the floor in front of Lynn. Lynn's eyes widened and his jaw almost hit the floor. Holy! Unicorn horns do that? It just fell off on its own? This isn't in the Magzoology books at all. He had read nothing about that. The unicorn's voice carried a hint of uncertainty. I don't have the currency you mentioned, but this should be enough to show my gratitude, right? I'm not picky at all. Heh! Lynn scooped up the horn. It was smooth as jade and warm to the touch. He cradled it carefully, his face lighting up. This was highly valuable. Ding! Task completed. Final corruption has been issued. The system chimed again. Lynn stared for a beat, then grinned as realization sank in. So the two tasks weren't mutually exclusive. It depended on the sequence. Healing it triggered a reward, and taking the horn triggered something else. Ha! System! You really are the best! He muttered, stuffing the horn away happily. Rest here tonight. It's absolutely safe, he told the unicorn. Tomorrow, I'll take you back to the Forbidden Forest. All right. Thank you again for saving me, respected, The unicorn faltered, realizing it still didn't know Lynn's name. Lynn, he supplied. Anya. The unicorn answered, settling down. By the time they emerged from the room, it was late. Lynn glanced around the empty dormitory. Of the three who'd gone to detention, not one had returned. Just then, beep, 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 you have one unread message. Right. Messages couldn't be received inside the dormitory. Lynn pulled out his phone. It was a message from William. We're all in the school infirmary. Madame Pomfrey said we're suffering from shock and must stay overnight for observation. Don't worry. Lynn rubbed his chin, amused. He'd just been the one who'd gone through a major battle, and yet the bystanders had ended up in the infirmary? Odd, but the truth didn't bother him. He'd already come out in the black. The next morning in the Great Hall, Lynn leisurely sipped pumpkin juice and ate bacon and eggs while the whole school buzzed with increasingly exaggerated retellings of the Forbidden Forest incident. Have you heard? Last night, Harry Potter single-handedly fended off a powerful dark wizard in the Forbidden Forest and saved a unicorn. A Gryffindor freshman told his companion. No way. I heard from Slytherin that it was William Smith from Hufflepuff who drove the dark wizard off. Another student objected. You're both wrong, a Ravenclaw interjected, pushing up their glasses. My cousin is on the student council. He says it was Headmaster Dumbledore himself who took action, caught the dark wizard, and sent him to Azkaban. Lynn's lips twitched at the increasingly ridiculous rumors. He didn't care who got the glory. He'd already gotten what he wanted. He finished breakfast, wiped his mouth, and headed to the school infirmary to check on his shocked roommates. He knocked on the door. Come in, William called from inside. Lynn pushed the door open and was met by several pairs of eyes fixed on him. Oh, good morning, everyone. 56. Leaving aside the facts. The school infirmary smelled faintly of disinfectant. Edgar, William, Ollie, and Malfoy lay in beds nearby, with Harry, Ron, and Hermione down the row. Madame Pomfrey bustled at a medicine cabinet in the distance. When Lynn pushed the door open, Edgar forced a smile, though his face was still a little pale. Lynn, you came to see us, he called. Lynn walked over, casually picked up an apple from the bedside table, took a bite, and answered offhandedly, Why else would I be here? To sample school life. Hermione, in the next bed, sat bolt upright, curiosity written all over her face. Lynn, Malfoy told us you saved him and Harry last night, she said. He also said, You have a phoenix. Is that true? Lynn paused mid-bite. He instantly adopted a look of puzzled concern and turned to Hermione, brow furrowing in sympathy. A phoenix? How could that be? Did Malfoy see something awful in the Forbidden Forest? Maybe he's hallucinating. Has Madame Pomfrey checked him? Being terrified can cause all sorts of things. He shook his head as he spoke, projecting unmistakable commiseration. The expression was so sincere it looked like he'd never heard the story before. Inside, Lynn rehearsed his thoughts. I'm not lying. Putting the facts aside, I mainly saved William and Edgar, and happened to save Harry and Malfoy on the way. As for Wu Anne, she's a free phoenix temporarily staying with me. How can anyone say she's mine? Perfect logic. Applause to me. Hermione considered Lynn's worried face and her own knowledge of magical beasts. Phoenixes were extraordinarily rare and dignified. In modern records, only Dumbledore's fox and the guardian creature of a phoenix-emblazoned Quidditch team were clearly attached to people. A first year owning a phoenix? It made no sense. Her suspicion melted into relief. I thought so, she said. Malfoy must have been terrified and hallucinated. A phoenix? No way. Lynn gave Hermione's reasoning an approving look in his head and smoothly changed the subject, turning to William to keep up his act of ignorance. By the way, William, what exactly happened last night? Why are you all in the infirmary? It sounds exciting. William pushed his glasses up, and despite the absurdity of Lynn's performance, went along with it. We were patrolling in groups and ran into that dark wizard who attacked the unicorn. He was dangerous. We barely escaped. Firenze the centaur showed up and drove him off with arrows. Hagrid and the others took us back to the castle. Madame Pomfrey said we were pretty shaken and needed to be watched overnight. He added, helplessly. As for Malfoy, he's been insisting since he woke up that you came on a phoenix to save us. Professor McGonagall came to ask questions and didn't believe him either. Edgar listened without blinking, especially at Malfoy's fantastical claim. He pulled the blanket half over his face and started shaking with suppressed laughter, his cheeks flushing red. William, you take lying seriously, Edgar thought. Lynn's acting is Oscar-worthy. Lynn was almost losing it, too. He took a big bite of his apple to hide the smile tugging at his lips. From William's account, he pieced together what had happened after he left. Firenze had escorted the frightened students to meet Hagrid. Everyone involved in the patrol ended up in the infirmary. When professors came to question them, the stories matched. Everyone credited the centaur, except for Malfoy, who insisted on the phoenix. Lynn cleared his throat with a stage-worthy cough, putting on an expression of deep sympathy. Poor Malfoy, he sighed. To be that frightened and imagining things, I hope he recovers soon. The concern in his voice and face felt convincingly real. Earlier that night, Lynn had brought the crate to the part of the Forbidden Forest where the unicorn herd usually grazed. The air there was purer, almost peaceful, full of a scent like lily of the valley, with tall, lush trees all around. Anya, we're here. Time to come out. He patted the crate and opened the lid, expecting the unicorn to step out. Nothing stirred. Lynn frowned. Was she shy? Sleeping too soundly? He knocked on the crate again, harder this time. Anya, wake up, you're home. Still nothing. No silver hairs floated out. Anya wasn't rude or disinclined to return to her herd. She'd normally be eager. Lynn decided to go in and check. After ensuring no one was nearby, he climbed into the crate. The interior was still surprisingly roomy. He walked toward the small area he'd set up for Anya, a patch of simulated forest with lush grass and a clear spring pool. Anya, are you here? He called. Silence answered him. Then he tried the name that always summoned a different helper. Wuan. A familiar ripple of warmth appeared, and the phoenix materialized at his side, surrounded by a soft glow. What is it, Master? The phoenix chirped. Have you seen Anya? I called and she didn't come out. I can't find her here. Wuan cocked her head, uncertain. I saw her earlier. She went toward Lumiere's area. She should be with Lumiere, I think. At Lumiere? Lynn's heart lurched. An ominous feeling settled over him. Chapter 57. What happened? Lynn had just reached Lumiere's private habitat when a thick smell of alcohol hit him. Malt and grapes, oak barrels, and something sweet. He fanned the air without changing his face, oddly amused. He'd gotten used to this smell by now. Anya, Lumiere, he called. A drunken Lumiere stumbled out instead of the more reliable Anya. Its mane was stained with wine, and it let out a loud burp. Hick, Lynn, you come to drink with us? Lynn held Lumiere's head down as the creature nosed his pockets for a bottle. Wuan said Anya was with you. Where is she? She's inside, Lumiere crowed, strangely proud. Her tolerance is amazing. Hick! She can outdrink me. That sinking feeling hit Lynn hard. He pushed Lumiere aside and peered in, and almost had a heart attack. Anya, the unicorn who used to look so noble and holy, was standing next to a wine barrel nearly half her height. She'd lowered her long neck and was drinking straight from it, making loud, happy glug-glug sounds. The whiskey was disappearing by the minute. Anya! Lynn shouted. She jerked her head up, silver lips wet with drops of alcohol, and greeted him with an excited burp. Lynn, you're here. Want some? This stuff's so good, hick, but there's hardly any left. Lynn glanced at the 7 or 8 empty bottles scattered nearby and at Anya's glassy, uninhibited expression, and felt his worldview twist again. He politely refused. I won't drink. If you like it, you can take some with you. Anya's eyes lit up like searchlights. Oh, how could I resist? Hey! Her silvery tail was already wagging. That night in the Forbidden Forest, a bizarre parade formed that even made the centaurs stare. A unicorn levitating a long train of wine barrels behind her, striding confidently back toward the herd. After seeing Anya off, things quieted down for a while. Lynn's routine stayed the same. Classes and the Black Lake, where he kept up his persistent fishing project. Whether he actually caught anything was another story. He also continued tending his expanding vegetable patch. With the blessing of the abundance ability, the land had become a small sign of plenty. What began as a few basic vegetables and herbs had grown into a diverse little farm. Fruits and vegetables were round and larger than usual, bright and delicious beyond description. That afternoon, Lynn wandered over to check for ripe watermelons. The big one they'd sliced the day before had sweet, sand-like flesh and plenty of juice. He and his friends had polished it off in minutes and wanted more. He tapped a particularly round melon with his palm. Thump, thump, thump. This one's ripe. I'll take it back and slice it up. He tapped another. Thump, thump, thump. This one's juicy too, perfect for juicing. He went to the third melon and paused when he heard a clip-clop sound. Huh, how can a watermelon make that noise? Are there bugs inside? When he looked up, he froze. A huge herd of unicorns had gathered at the edge of his patch, nearly surrounding it. Merlin's lacy triangular camisole. Lynn thought. What on earth? Are they assembling to attack Hogwarts? Before he could decide whether to draw his wand or run, a familiar face squeezed out from the herd, looking sheepish. Lynn, do you have any more alcohol? Lynn blinked, looked at Anya, and then at the dozens of quiet unicorns behind her. I do. So you all came in such a big group today to look for alcohol? Anya nodded vigorously, and the herd bobbed their heads in unison. Lynn stared at their expectant faces. It might not be possible. An older unicorn stepped forward, its horn long and glossy. Young wizard, it said politely, we do not wish to take your wares for free. We will pay appropriately, with our tail hairs and manes. Payment? Lynn sputtered. It's not about payment. My stock is extremely limited. The ones Anya took last time were almost all of it. I really don't have enough to satisfy the needs of the entire herd. He had only bought the alcohol with Lumiere's capacity in mind. Who could have guessed it would turn into a bulk order for the whole unicorn herd? The request was absurd. He watched the unicorns' faces go from hopeful to disappointed and thought fast. He finally grit his teeth and made a difficult decision. He could make Lumiere suffer a bit. No, how could he call it suffering? He mentally corrected himself. This was to help the Abraxan overcome its alcohol dependence for the sake of its healthy growth. What a noble reason. All right, Lynn said, putting on a look of magnanimity. I'll give you all my current stock, but this is really everything. If you need more next time, please pre-order. The transaction took place by the edge of the vegetable patch. Wuan hauled the barrels from Lynn's storage straight to the unicorn's habitat. Lynn didn't sell everything. He kept some back for Lumiere. He wasn't the sort of master who would forget his bonds for a little profit. Inside the habitat, Lumiere was throwing a tantrum. Where's the wine? Where's the wine? How is there only this much left of all that wine? Wuan answered calmly. Master said those wines were defective, watered down by dogs. They're not good for you if you drink too much. He'll get you something else when he's on holiday. 58. If I can't figure it out, then I won't think about it anymore. On Saturday, Lynn walked into Professor Quirrell's office for another of his extracurricular lessons. After explaining and demonstrating several rather dangerous dark arts as if it were routine, Quirrell spoke to him in a weary voice. Mr. Lynn, I think this will be our last private lesson. From now on, you won't need to come anymore. Lynn was a little surprised. Quirrell had shown him an unusual amount of attention before, praising his diligence and talent. He said nothing and simply nodded. Then, as if remembering something important, he asked cautiously, Then, the restricted section pass you gave me. You're not taking that back, are you? No, Quirrell said dryly. You can keep it. He bent and pulled a heavy book from a low, inconspicuous cabinet beside his desk. Secrets of the Darkest Art. The spine and edges were worn. It looked very old. This book, Quirrell said, pushing it across the desk and lowering his voice, contains many, more profound and authentic secrets. With your interest and talent, I think you'll find it very appealing. Lynn took the book. It felt heavy in his hands. He blinked, then said with some awkwardness, "But Professor, the restricted section already has a copy of Secrets of the Darkest Art, and I've lent that out. The material in it is indeed," he chose his words carefully, "very distinctive, but some parts are a little vague." The corner of Quirrell's mouth twitched. "Ha! The copy in the restricted section is a version purified and censored by the headmaster. Many key things were erased. This one," he indicated the book in Lynn's hands, "is the original, unmodified." "Oh, I see. Thank you very much, Professor." Lynn's face lit up as if he'd found treasure. He hugged the book to his chest, bowed, and left the office on lighter feet. Free at last. The moment he stepped out of the room and away from the suffocating garlic smell, the corridor air felt fresher. Quirrell's lessons had taught him a lot. Engrave had let him absorb useful knowledge. But every time he was near that eccentric man, he felt an odd, shadowy scrutiny, as if something watched from the darkness. As Lynn's footsteps faded down the corridor, Professor Quirrell sagged into his chair, drained. Master, he muttered at last, why not teach this boy a while longer? His talent is rare. Perhaps he could become ours." "Shut up, you fool!" A voice snapped from the back of his head, sharp with impatience and violence. Pain lanced through Quirrell as if someone had struck him. He almost folded over. "We don't have time to waste on instructing a little wizard, if it weren't for your weak, useless body preventing me from acting directly." Lord Voldemort's voice paused, then shifted into a strange, tempting cadence. "As for that book, the knowledge in it is fascinating, full of power and secrets of eternity. Any seeker of power would find it irresistible." What Voldemort did not say aloud was that the original he had handed to Lynn had been tampered with. Pages detailing the core, specific steps for creating Horcruxes had long since been torn out by his own hand. He wanted to sow curiosity, to annoy Dumbledore, rather than actually train another dark wizard who might grow into a threat. Back in the Hufflepuff dormitory, Lynn impatiently opened the heavy volume. "Let me see. Unforgivable curses. Imperio theory and practice. Haven't engraved this yet." He activated Engrave, and the complex theory and technique of Imperio flowed into his knowledge base like a trickle, becoming a stream. As he skimmed, he engraved continuously. Spell, curse, ritual. He learned first and judged later. Knowledge itself had no morality, he told himself. Its use depended on the one who wielded it. He trusted his own character enough to carry on. Pages rustled under his fingers as he absorbed dangerous and dark lore the way a whale swallows water. He read until he reached the chapter on Horcruxes. Immortality, Herpo the Foul, Ancient Dark Wizard, Methods of Creation and Taboos. His eyes caught on Methods of Creation and Taboos, and he flipped forward, heart speeding. The pages that should have explained the procedure were missing, torn out cleanly, the edges ragged. "Fuck!" Lynn couldn't help cursing, slapping the book down. "Quirrell said this was the uncensored original. Is he pulling my leg?" He leaned in and inspected the gap. It wasn't that the book had never recorded the steps. The pages had been physically removed. Lynn leaned back, hands clasped behind his head, staring at the ceiling. Why would Quirrell do that? Giving him a restricted section pass had been odd. Then Quirrell, contrary to his usual stuttering, had proactively offered to tutor him in defense against the dark arts, which, judging by what he'd taught, leaned heavily toward the dark arts, then handed him an original text with the most important pages ripped out. It all felt wrong. Quirrell seemed to be guiding him toward deeper, more dangerous knowledge, while deliberately withholding certain specifics, provoking curiosity without delivering the means. The only explanation that made sense was that Quirrell had some scheme that he intended to use Lynn for some hidden purpose. "I can't figure it out." Lynn rubbed his brow. "Forget it. I'm too lazy to think about it." He pushed the question away. Going back to Quirrell to demand the missing pages wasn't even a consideration. He was young and full of life. It was far too early for heavy topics like immortality. "Besides," he muttered, "this is immortality, not eternal youth." He thought of the biographical blurb on Nicholas Flamel he'd read earlier. The famous alchemist had lived for over 600 years thanks to the Philosopher's Stone, but in old age his body had grown frail, as fragile as glass. Lynn curled his lip. What's the point of living like a fragile antique? I'd rather live like myself, eat and drink when I want, fish, raise pets. Isn't that better than being some undying wreck? He shoved the incomplete copy of Secrets of the Darkest Art to the bottom of his trunk and decided not to touch it for the time being. For now, catching big fish and studying alchemy were far more interesting than unraveling the secrets of Horcruxes. 59. It was a little awkward. Today is a perfect day for fishing. Everything I wish for will come true. Lynn hummed as he carried his rod to a new spot along the edge of the forbidden forest. He picked a good place, cast his line, and settled in for his usual session of daydreaming. Clop clop, a faint, disturbingly familiar clip-clop sounded somewhere nearby. Without turning, Lynn muttered, "That noise again. Sounds like some ungulate that's had one too many." He spun around. Behind him were only dense bushes and an old crooked tree stump. Nothing at all. No tracks, no sign of anything. Auditory hallucinations? He wondered. He scratched his head, blaming his nerves after the last time he'd been chased by a herd of unicorns. He turned back to watch his bobber. Clop, clop. This time it was closer, almost right behind that leaning oak. Lynn didn't hesitate. He shouted toward it. "Anya, come out! Stop hiding! I know it's you! I could write a whole code from your hoofbeats." Silence answered him. Not a leaf stirred, as if the earlier sound had been nothing but wind through pebbles. Still not coming out? Lynn narrowed his eyes and put on his "I see right through you" look. "If you don't show up, I'll come over and invite you myself. I'm counting to 3. Clop, clop. Before he could finish, a silver-white head slowly appeared from around the trunk. Anya flashed an innocent smile. "Hey, Lynn, fancy meeting you by the lake. Well, do you happen to have any of that? Wine left?" Lynn stared. The unicorn had actually improved her stealth and tracking just to sneak a sip of wine. "Didn't I have Wuan send dozens of barrels to you a few days ago?" he demanded. "How are you already out? Are you drinking it like water?" Anya hung her head and scraped the grass with a hoof, voice barely a whisper. "Well, everyone thought it tasted really good, so we drank a little faster than expected." "You still have the nerve to say that." Lynn rubbed his temple. "It's gone. Really gone. Not a drop left. You lot cleaned out my inventory. Even the landlord's out of spare grain." Anya wilted as if frost had found her, then shuffled over to Lynn's side. For the sake of conversation, she asked, "So why aren't your friends here to keep you company while you fish?" Lynn answered without blinking. "Them. Oh, the others are busy. They're buried in their revision in the common room or the library, making every second count. Very diligent." That was a lie. The truth was he'd been so loud in study hall that the 3 of them had collectively kicked him out. Anya tried to steer the talk back toward wine a couple more times, but Lynn shut her down with, "We can talk about it next term." Interest gone, she brightened and said, "All right then, enjoy your fishing. I'm heading back." She turned and went off with crisp, decisive steps, no hesitation in her stride. Lynn watched her disappear into the trees, shook his head, and sat back down to continue his patient staring contest with the fish. Time drifted. Just as he was about to nod off, the bobber plunged beneath the water. "Whoa! Jackpot, a big one! Definitely troll-sized." Lynn snapped awake and grabbed the rod. "This is weird," he muttered as he reeled. "There's no tug at all. Snagged on the bottom? No, if it were snagged, it wouldn't move. Maybe weeds." He stepped backward until, with a spray, something burst from the surface. It wasn't a fish, but a wooden box, about the size of a shoebox. The wood looked durable and lacquered, with a brass lock. Lynn's excitement drained into bafflement. An angler can catch everything except fish, apparently. Last time he'd hauled up an old boot. The time before some tossed junk. Now a treasure chest? Was the lake a junkyard? He shook the water off the box and inspected it. There were no curses, no dark aura, just a sealed container. Lynn raised his wand. Alohomora! Light spun from the tip of his wand and struck the brass lock, but nothing happened. The lock held fast. "What the? It's warded," Lynn snapped. "Great. Not a fish, and now a locked chest." He stamped down on the box in irritation. Crack! The seemingly sturdy wood split under his foot, and the lid popped open. Nestled on soft padding inside lay a pigeon egg-sized ruby, round and blood-bright. Lynn crouched, staring at the warm stone in his hand. It felt warm, not cold. He looked from the gem back to the still, mirror-flat water. Was this a catch or not? After a moment's thought, he decided to pack up and take the ruby back to the castle for study. He was gathering his rod and line when a sharp pop of air sounded behind him. A flutter of golden sparks scattered through the clearing. Lynn whipped around, and his hand went instinctively to his wand. The crackle and light vanished almost as quickly as they'd appeared, and a tall figure stood there. "Tom, don't be so obsessed," a familiar voice began, then cut off like a broken record. The man in front of him wasn't who Lynn had expected. The speaker blinked and cleared his throat. Mr. Lynn?" Lynn stared, wand in hand. "Professor Dumbledore?" The two looked at each other in awkward silence, the quiet between them stretching like the surface of the lake. "You call this fish bait?" Dumbledore's gaze swept over the fishing rod still in Lynn's hand and the wooden box by his feet that had been kicked open. "It seems I've interrupted your fishing time, Mr. Lynn," he said quietly. No, Professor. I was just about to head back. Are you here for a stroll by the lake?" Dumbledore smiled faintly. "I'm sorry, Mr. Lynn, but I am not here for a stroll." He got straight to the point. "In fact, I am looking for a lost item. Tell me, during your fishing, did you happen to see about this big," he indicated the size of a pigeon's egg, "inside a wooden box, a crimson gemstone?" Lynn froze. He took the red stone he'd been clutching and laid it in his palm. "Professor, do you mean this?" "Yes, that's it. Thank you very much for finding it, Mr. Lynn. This has saved me quite a bit of trouble." Dumbledore reached for it, and Lynn handed the ruby over. Seeing the headmaster take the stone so solemnly, Lynn's curiosity won out. "Professor, this ruby is?" Dumbledore slipped the gem into an inner pocket of his robes, and in a tone as casual as if he were commenting on the weather, delivered an answer that made the world tilt. "This is the Philosopher's Stone." "The Philosopher's Stone?" Lynn's eyes went wide. "Isn't that the alchemical object made by Nicholas Flamel that turns base metals into gold and produces the elixir of life?" "Professor, how could it be at the bottom of the Black Lake and inside such a shabby box?" Lynn's brain struggled to keep up. The legendary Philosopher's Stone, hauled up with a fishing rod. Dumbledore's tone stayed calm, but what he said next was even more astonishing. "I borrowed it from Nicholas to use as bait." "Lynn, use the Philosopher's Stone as bait? Are you trying to catch a kraken or a six?" Dumbledore seemed unbothered by Lynn's incredulous expression and continued, "There's a big fish in the 29. It needs some special bait to tempt it to show itself." Inside Lynn's head, why not just say, "Lord Voldemort is in the 29. Big fish and bait, are you trying to fool a child? Who uses the Philosopher's Stone as fishing bait? The cost is insane." Dumbledore noticed Lynn's hesitation, smiled a little more deeply, but offered no further explanation. He straightened his robes to leave. Then, as if remembering something small but important, he turned back. "Additionally, Mr. Lynn, I must remind you, the Forbidden Forest is off-limits to students. Of course, given that your main area of activity today seemed to be along the shores of the Black Lake, and you unexpectedly did me a small favor, this time I shall behave as if I did not see you, perhaps, possibly accidentally, approaching the boundary of the Forbidden Forest." Lynn was speechless again. He had only wanted to fish in peace. Instead, he had hauled up the Philosopher's Stone, drawn the headmaster to the lakeside, and earned a warning for good measure. Dumbledore departed briskly. "Dumbledore, I suppose I can't leave it behind after all. I never expected it to be fished out like that. How odd." In the blink of an eye, final exams were over, and a relaxed atmosphere filled Hogwarts. Everyone was waiting for the end-of-year feast and the holidays. In the Hufflepuff dormitory, Edgar held his new Seven Seaman time and stared at it in despair. How was he going to explain this to his parents? He saw Lynn's thing casually lying on the bedside table and could not contain himself. "Holy cow, Lynn, are you even human?" Edgar grabbed Lynn's report, finger trembling as he pointed at the neat row of O's. "You're always off fishing or messing with alchemical gadgets. I never saw you studying during revision week. How did you get outstanding in every subject? What is your brain made of?" Lynn lay back on his bed, controlling a paper crane to circle the room. Without lifting an eyelid, he drawled, annoyingly serene. "Standard procedure. Standard procedure. Just some measly exam results. Not worth mentioning. Knowledge is there. I just popped it into my head in passing. Inner thought. Having a cheat is just great. Let me see yours. I'll observe and learn. With a nimble flip, he sat up and, without giving Edgar a chance to refuse, snatched the crumpled back. He cleared his throat and read aloud. History of Magic, P. Tsk, tsk. Professor Binns' hypnotic powers are as strong as ever. Potions, P. Quite reasonable. Charms, acceptable. Professor Flitwick is truly soft-hearted. Herbology, A. Professor Sprout's mercy. Transfiguration, A. Defense against the dark arts. A. Astronomy, A. And finally, Quidditch. Oh, congratulations, your one outstanding has been born. Lynn put the report down and looked at Edgar, who was flushed with embarrassment. I say, Edgar, your specialization is a bit unique, isn't it? Aside from being a genius in the air, how do you manage to live so dangerously close to the passing line on the ground? Edgar snatched his 7 back and shoved it under his pillow, his face switching between red and pale. Hey, well, everyone has their strengths, specialization in one's field, he mumbled, trying to laugh it off. He wasn't about to admit he'd slept through most of revision week or that he'd relied on solid guesses for his exam papers. Lynn reached for William's 17 on the desk. As expected, Williams was steady, a neat row of O's across the board, except for Quidditch, which was an A. As expected of William, steady, Lynn said, giving a thumbs up. His gaze fell to Ollie by the window. Ollie handed over his 17 wordlessly. When Lynn looked, his eyes lit up. Good grief, a hexagonal warrior. On Ollie's report, there wasn't a single P or O. All steady E's, exceeds expectations. Every subject sat comfortably below outstanding but well above passing. Edgar, look at William and Ollie, then look at your own results. Lynn teased. I know. Edgar sprang up and hurriedly threw on his robes, cutting off Lynn's lecture. It's getting late. Time for the great hall for the end-of-year feast. Come on. If we're any later, there'll be no food left. With that, he practically shoved Lynn out the door, successfully changing the subject from his own shame to the upcoming feast and awards. William and Ollie smiled, straightened their robes, and followed their roommates into the crowd, heading toward the great hall.